After the golden flames died down, the mummies and vines in the temple hall had been reduced to ash. Matthew had deliberately steered the fiend fire away from the statue when the white-robed priestess stood in front of it. He didn't want to risk damaging the deity's effigy. Several translucent tentacles of mental energy shot from his left hand toward the priestess. Whoever animated that shell knew mental touch was especially effective against temporary vessels. The figure dodged and unleashed a dark green spell that severed two of the tentacles. Mental touch wasn't limited to straight strikes, though. More mental tendrils wrapped around the priestess and pierced into her body, cutting off whatever had been animating the shell. She collapsed, unable to move. The unseen controller immediately withdrew its magical power. Her skin rapidly shriveled and lost its sheen. In a short while, she was nothing but a dry corpse. Isis put a hand to her tight chest and let out a long, shaky sigh. I thought I was going to be burned alive. When that golden fire came closest, it was only an arm's length away. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. By the time I came to, it was over. Luna smiled lightly. Matthew doesn't use that kind of magic unless he's sure he can control it. Isis stared at Matthew with reverence. Ouagadougou might as well have been a bystander at the Goblet of Fire. In all her life, she'd never seen anyone as powerful, perhaps more powerful than some professors at Ouagadougou. The wizarding newspapers weren't sold in Egypt, and local reports had scarcely mentioned him. She had no idea how formidable he really was. As a top student at Ouagadougou, she had thought herself among the best of her year. Seeing Matthew's power made her feel like a frog in a well. After dealing with the white-robed priestess, Matthew ignored the others' thoughts and went to the stone box before the statue of Osiris. It was precisely because the priestess had been standing so close to that box that he'd held his fire. Inside was another papyrus book. He flipped it open. It was written in ancient Egyptian script, which he couldn't read, so he handed it to Professor Smith. Smith skimmed it and said, "Myths and stories about Osiris, the underworld, and fertility. There's a long section describing the afterlife, and the back contains notes on sorcery and dark rites." Matthew used Geminio to duplicate the papyrus and gave one copy to Professor Smith, asking him to translate it when they were done here. Finding nothing else of interest in that hall, they moved on. After lighting the obelisk in the next chamber, they found another divine statue. "This is Isis, the goddess of magic." Professor Smith identified it. The statue wore the throne headdress, the royal seat incarnate, a potent symbol of pharaonic power. Many pharaohs declared themselves children of Isis. Strangely, Matthew detected no magical residue from the statue. There were mummified white-robed priests before it, but they showed no sign of stirring. Maybe they knew they were outclassed and withdrew their power ahead of time, Matthew guessed. If so, it saved them a fight. He had a feeling, however, that the unknown force behind all this wouldn't let them simply take the temple's treasures and leave. Still, the withdrawal of power made it easy to recover more artifacts. Over the next halls, they found additional statues, 8 in total of the Ennead. The last 5 had their animating power withdrawn, allowing Matthew to retrieve the ancient books from the stone boxes without a struggle. One book had been destroyed when a statue exploded earlier. Otherwise, he had recovered the texts from each altar. After they left the Hall of Shu, god of air, they found themselves back in the first chamber, the one that had enshrined Set, god of deserts and storms. Professor Smith frowned. "We've circled back, but where is the statue of Ra?" "The sun god is gone." Ra was the most widely worshipped deity in ancient Egypt. They had encountered 8 of the Ennead statues, yet Ra's image was missing. It didn't make sense. Luna, bright and sharp after taking Felix Felicis, said the halls might be arranged in a circular pattern. If so, could there be an undiscovered central chamber? Matthew rubbed his chin, recalling the orientation of each hall's entrance. "Let's look carefully to see if we missed anything." They inspected the chamber, but found no hidden doors. While the others hesitated, Matthew noticed Luna crouched at the base of the destroyed statue. "Find something?" he asked. "Look at this base. It turns," she pointed out. Matthew leaned in. The exposed mechanism under the smashed statue had internal components designed to rotate. He used the invisible hand to grip both sides and twist. It turned smoothly. "It works," he said. Luna indicated a position. Turn this side to face here. This is the front of the statue. I think all the statues should face the center, Matthew decided. Given Ra's status, it made sense the statues would be oriented inward toward his shrine. He rotated the base to face the center and moved to the next hall. Each statue's plinth could be turned. They all clicked into position, faces directed inward. When the last statue slid into place, a deep rumbling came from beneath the temple. Dust rained down from the walls. Everyone instinctively covered their mouths and noses. Matthew cast a giant bubble charm, surrounding them in a clear sphere that kept the dust out and let them breathe. The inner walls began to shift. Bricks trembled and rearranged themselves. The hall's inner walls opened and stacked into a spiraling stone staircase, an apparently bottomless, ceilingless stairwell winding down and up from the temple's center. Professor Smith recovered his composure quickly. This is enchantment work. Ordinary mechanics couldn't produce a change like this. Now it splits two ways, up and down, Luna observed. The Temple of Ra must be above. Ra should be at the top, Matthew agreed. Let's check upward first. They climbed the winding steps. Glancing down through the gaps, the drop made even the most steady legs feel weak. The void below was black as pitch. Partway up, Matthew's brow twitched. He sensed a strong magical fluctuation coming from below. Luna asked, "Do you hear water?" Isis shook her head. "I don't." "I do," Matthew said. "It's coming from below." Soon the sound of rushing water grew louder, audible to everyone. As a second-level wizard, Matthew had better stamina and longer sight than the others. He was the first to spot the danger. "Run up! Fast! Water is gushing up from below." They sprinted. A fountain of dark water burst up out of the bottomless abyss and surged through the lower halls, pushing out through the temple entrance. The flood poured into the underground city like a deluge. That water was saturated with dark magic. The influx forced open the sealed humanoid coffins. The mummies inside crawled free. All the mummies across the city revived when soaked by the flood, and a chorus of roars echoed through streets that had been silent for millennia. From their high position on the stairs, the group avoided being swept away. Matthew listened as the mummies' roars multiplied, but he wasn't overly worried. He'd already determined that ordinary humanoid mummies were only marginally stronger than Inferi and posed little real threat to him. They reached the top. As Professor Smith had predicted, they stood in a shrine to Ra. The statue depicted Ra with a hawk's head and a human body, wearing a solar disk encircled by a serpent. Ra was the supreme deity. The other members of the Ennead were once parts of him or his descendants. 3 white-robed priestesses knelt before the statue, but they lay inert. If they weren't at the top, then perhaps the source was below, Matthew thought. He used the invisible hand to lift the stone box before Ra and opened it. Inside lay another papyrus book. A figure broke the water below and shot up into the shrine. Thick black smoke clung to him. His clothing was unlike the robed priests. A golden mask covered his face, and on his head sat a combined red and white crown, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. His chest glittered with gold, a broad pectoral collar, bracelets, armbands, and a jeweled belt. A linen kilt fell to his ankles. In his hand he held a straight scepter topped with a rounded head. He was unmistakably a pharaoh. He spoke in ancient Egyptian. Matthew couldn't understand. "Professor Smith, translate." Smith's voice was tight. "He says we have disturbed his slumber and made his resurrection incomplete. We will pay with our lives." The pharaoh did not bother with further words. He slammed his scepter down, and a gate of the underworld yawned open. Countless underworld wraiths swarmed out, creatures that devoured living things on contact. Even souls could be shredded by them. Matthew brandished his wand. With a sweep, the floor liquefied into molten lava. The advancing wraiths were swallowed by the flow. 3 great lava serpents rose from the ground and lunged at the pharaoh, but he stood unchanged. A pillar of golden light descended and enveloped him. The lava serpents dissipated when they met that light, unable to harm him. Matthew sent out mental touch tendrils from his left hand, but they dissolved on contact with the golden pillar, as if hitting solid air. Matthew frowned. It even blocks mental energy. After testing it twice, he noticed a pattern. The pharaoh could not attack while maintaining the golden pillar to defend himself. The pharaoh lowered the pillar and called out again, "Awaken, spirits of the underworld!" Souls poured from the open gate and swarmed into the three kneeling priestesses. The corpses writhed, then stood up, awkward at first, as if relearning how to move. The dark magic that nourished them filled their shriveled skin and made them lustrous and full again. They were priestesses, triplets, nearly identical in face. Thick black hair fell like a waterfall against wheat-colored skin. Their beauty was wild and primal. Their long, full figures radiated a raw, elemental charm. In their dark, murky eyes, Matthew seemed to glimpse countless souls writhing within. 282. Modified eyeless snake monster. Matthew moved the moment the three revived. Wings of wind condensed behind his back, and he took to the air. His 34 robes trembled violently as dozens of soul touches surged from his cuffs and sleeves, sweeping toward the three. Souls and bodies of the recently resurrected were not yet fully synchronized. Soul touch was extremely effective in those moments. It could sever the link between a controller and their body. He had used this method before against the white-robed priests in the statue hall to separate controllers from their physical shells. Translucent tentacles wound around the slender, full-bodied three, sliding through their white priestess robes and piercing arms, thighs, chests, and foreheads. But Matthew quickly noticed something wrong. According to his plan, Soul Touch should have detached the three sisters' souls from their bodies, preventing them from acting under their controller's will. Instead, his Soul Touch was being blocked. The pharaoh had prepared defenses specifically against Soul Touch. When he summoned the three, he hadn't brought back only their souls. The souls of many subjects had been bound within their bodies by dark arts as well. Those additional souls acted as shields for the true occupants. Matthew's soul touch struck those shield souls and had no effect on the three sisters. Control. The three did not speak, but they moved as one. A faint golden glow spread across them as they linked to a long dormant deep in the temple, and surging magical fluctuations erupted from their bodies. A 15 floated before each sister. An eye of Horus was carved inside a triangle on each 15. They bore no 39s. These 15s were alchemical constructs functioning as 39s. The eyes of Horus in the 350s flared with brilliant gold, threads of light extending to form a triangular screen. Within that golden triangle, a massive eye of Horus appeared. Matthew's pupils narrowed. The three were preparing their 37, and he felt pure, immediate danger. He reacted without hesitation and cast the barrier of time. An invisible shield enveloped him, just as a shaft of light like sunlight shot from the golden screen toward him. It struck the barrier of time at the speed of light. The spell delayed the attack, consuming time power to slow it down. The golden shaft dropped from light speed to a slow, visible crawl, and Matthew slipped aside easily. He could sense how terrifying the energy inside that beam was. He could not have blocked it head-on. After he dodged, the golden shaft snapped free of the barrier's constraints and accelerated back to light speed. The temple's thick walls were paper beneath it. The beam pierced them and continued through the rock ceiling of the underground city and then into the surface above. On the surface, the archaeology team had left a handful of members to watch the camels, luggage, and the tunnel entrance. They sat in a circle around the pit, bored and waiting for their comrades to return. A middle-aged bearded man rose and rubbed his lower back. "Sitting like this makes my back hurt. I'm going over there to rest a bit." No one paid much attention. The man had recently had surgery for a herniated disc, so his desire to slack off wasn't surprising. He found a flat stone where the camels rested and lay down. The moment he did, a blinding gold filled his vision. A pillar of golden light erupted from the ground and shot straight into the sky. When it vanished, a bottomless black hole remained where it had stood. The bearded man's legs had been in the pillar's path. Like the earth itself, they were gone, vanished without a trace. Over a dozen camels that had been nearby also disappeared. No blood flowed. The ground looked as if it had been charred by extreme heat. The man froze for a beat before the shock turned to pain. "Ah! My legs!" Back in the underground temple, after Matthew dodged the golden pillar, the magical aura around the G3 withered. Using such an immense 30 so early had cost them dearly. Blood seeped from their skin, staining their priestess robes red and white. Matthew thought, using an ultimate move right at the start. The energy in that golden beam had been terrifying, and its speed was nearly impossible to avoid. If he hadn't had heightened 30-cent perception and immediately cast the barrier of time to slow it, he wouldn't have dodged it. Matthew transformed a wall of the temple into a 36 hippogriff with a flick of his 9. "You three, get out of the temple," he told Luna. "These people are dangerous." Luna didn't want to hold him back. She leapt onto the hippogriff. "You be careful too." Once the others were aboard, the hippogriff beat its wings and flew out. Matthew used his 39 to block 2 attacks aimed at it. Having expended so much power on the golden pillar, the 3 were considerably weaker. Matthew handled them with ease. With Luna gone and no one left to distract him, he let loose completely. Magic surged through him. The whole temple trembled. Stones seemed to melt and reshape. This place had been constructed with high 37 alchemical resistance, like a Hogwarts castle of alchemy, so ordinary transfiguration and spells usually failed. But everything was relative. Matthew's mastery of transfiguration had grown. He could now alter anti-7 structures of this level. From the hall's ceiling, a 36 palm slammed down, not at the thrower, but at the pharaoh hovering in the air. After reviving the 3 sisters, the pharaoh had begun a low chant. The sisters' 15s flew in front of him and formed a triangular barrier. Boom! Matthew's massive 36 palm struck that barrier with a thunderous crash. At the same time, the ground split open. Over a dozen muddy arms, like the grasping hands of restless spirits, snaked up and clamped around the sisters' wheat-colored calves and ankles, dragging them into the earth. The floor became a quagmire in an instant. Under the pull of those hands, the 3 sisters' graceful bodies were swallowed by mud. Within the bog, living blades erupted and churned like a meat grinder. Those blades shredded flesh and stone alike. Blood clouded the water a deep red. The sisters' physical bodies were ground to a blur of flesh and blood. As their bodies dissipated, the countless vengeful spirits bound inside them were freed. They rose as plumes of black smoke from the quagmire, wailing, full of resentment and pain, and surged toward Matthew. He thrust out his 39, and a powerful bolt of lightning leapt from its tip. When the lightning struck a spirit, it detonated into a tangle of electrical serpents. The serpents struck, and the affected vengeful spirits exploded, their souls dissipating. The rest fled in panic. Having dealt with the 3, Matthew set his sights on the pharaoh. The chant was nearly finished, and the pharaoh fled upward through the hole created by the golden beam. Matthew pursued, condensing a spear of thunder in his left hand and hurling it at him. The pharaoh finished his spell and summoned a defensive golden pillar of light above his head. The thunder spear struck it and disintegrated, powerless to touch the pharaoh only inches away. Then the stone pillar carved with Ra, the sun god, trembled in the underground city. The statue of Ra broke free, lifting from its base. A divine 36 dozens of meters tall stood amid the ruins. The torrent of water that had been rising from the temple's abyss, enough to drown the underground city, only reached just above the statue's ankles. The pharaoh here was Narmer, the unifier of ancient Egypt. His military and political talents were legendary, but his greatest skill was alchemy. Few in ancient Egyptian history rivaled him in that art. This subterranean city was the sanctuary he had crafted for himself. And 22, the giant god soldiers, were the city's guardians. Because he had lacked time during construction, he had built only 1 true giant god soldier. The other 8 pillars were ordinary stone. This giant god soldier took the form of Ra, a falcon head on a human body, a solar disk on its head with a snake coiled upon it. In its hand, it held the Ankh, the handled cross known to the Egyptians. Pharaoh Narmer landed on the giant god soldier's head and spoke in ancient Egyptian, "Those who disturb my slumber accept divine punishment." The base of the Ankh glowed. Golden clouds condensed, golden winds blew, and golden rain fell. Each gust and drop condensed from high concentrations of 37, each an attack. Luna and the others were already far away and were unharmed. Matthew braced his defenses. The barrier of time froze the wind and rain approaching him, making them linger like suspended droplets. Narmer was formidable, so Matthew brought out the eyeless basilisk he had recently finished modifying. After reclaiming the bio-workshop in the Wizard Tower, Matthew's first major project was to turn the eyeless experimental basilisk into a biological puppet. That creature had once been Herpo's test subject, born without eyes and unable to use a basilisk's curse, but enormous in size, several times larger than normal. Under the bio-workshop's modifications, every aspect had been enhanced. Flesh from the second-level wizard tier 3-headed dragon king from Heavenly Peak had been fused into its body, boosting its strength and giving it a breath attack. Eyes transplanted from the basilisk of Hogwarts, Chamber of Secrets endowed it with the basilisk curse. The basilisk puppet was powered by a 37 core and 37 stones. Its intelligence matched an alchemical puppet, so it could act with autonomy even without constant control. The golden winds and rains could not cut through the basilisk puppet's hide. It opened its massive maw and unleashed a devastating breath, scattering the golden clouds. Pharaoh Narmer, recognizing an alchemical construct when he saw one, roared, "Raz, giant god soldier, crush it!" The basilisk puppet and the giant god soldier, two behemoths born of different 37 systems, collided. The basilisk seized the stone colossus, cracks spidered across its body and rapidly widened. The flesh and blood creation from the wizard tower proved superior. Pharaoh Narmer's voice trembled with disbelief. "The stone I refined is the hardest substance in the world. How can a creature of flesh and blood defeat it?" He had been unmade by time. Materials he once considered unsurpassable were inferior to the hardened compounds produced by modern alchemy, and the wizard tower's alchemy was far stronger than his era's. The giant god soldier could not withstand the basilisk puppet's might. Under its onslaught, the stone titan was crushed to pieces. Countless fragments rained down, kicking up dust. Seeing his masterpiece destroyed so easily shook Narmer deeply. He raised his scepter and bellowed, "Damned intruder, die!" But his body froze instantly. Just as Pharaoh Narmer finished his threat, he found he could no longer move. The basilisk had been a later product of Herpo's experiments. In Narmer's time, basilisks did not yet exist. He had no idea that a basilisk's gaze carried a curse. He looked directly into the creature's eyes and was struck by the petrifying curse of the basilisk puppet. The basilisk curse wasn't enough to instantly kill someone of Narmer's caliber. The same would have been true for Matthew. Even if he'd been hit by an instant death curse, he wouldn't necessarily have died outright. Magic follows laws. If one's magical power is strong enough, one can resist many curses. But even at that level, being turned to stone briefly in the middle of a fight was deadly in its own way. With Narmer petrified, he couldn't maintain his protective golden aura. He could only watch as Matthew prepared his spell. Matthew's figure shimmered, like multiple overlapping images flickering into one. Avada Kedavra, 6 killing curses shot forth, overlapping and converging into a single, overwhelmingly powerful blast. He had used a time-instant kill formation, gathering spells that he would otherwise cast at different moments and releasing them simultaneously at a single point in time. To Narmer's senses, it was as if 6 killing curses struck at once. Matthew wasn't particularly strong in unforgivable curses. His Avada Kedavra was no match for a dark wizard like Lord Voldemort. Narmer's soul had endured for millennia. It wasn't something an ordinary killing curse could erase. But by stacking multiple curses through the time-instant kill formation, the effect approached the destructive force of a killing curse cast at full strength by a Dark Lord. The green light of death filled the space. Narmer tried to abandon his physical shell to escape, but millennia of dormancy had dulled his instincts. He was too slow. Before his soul could flee, the lethal light swallowed him. A terrible scream tore from him, an agony that hit to the core of his being. Then, with a final sound like shattering glass, Pharaoh Narmer's soul exploded into fragments. The king who had once united Upper and Lower Egypt fell into eternal sleep. When the battle ended, Matthew glanced toward where Luna had been. The water gushing from the temple had flooded the entire underground city. There was nowhere on the ground to stand. The hippogriff had carried them, circling above the city's rim, so they had remained safe. After confirming Luna was unharmed, Matthew relaxed and began cleaning up. He stowed the basilisk puppet back into his bag and gathered the remains of the colossus. The level of alchemical work in the wizard tower exceeded Narmer's, But they were different systems. These pieces still had research value. He would take them to the alchemy workshop for the alchemists to analyze, perhaps extracting useful techniques or craftsmanship. Narmer had carried a number of alchemical items: the golden funerary mask, his scepter, his crown, and the gold jewelry on his body all bore magical fluctuations. Matthew packed them away. He also returned to the smaller temple and retrieved the 3 golden spheres carved with the Eye of Horus that had been left behind by the tomb's original occupants. He was intrigued. These spheres functioned like wands, but could hover and release spells flexibly from multiple directions. They reminded him of the enchanted tomes and crystal orbs from fantasy tales in his previous life. Next, he dove into the water to investigate the source. He hadn't forgotten that Narmer had burst forth from the temple stairs and that the flood had originated there. He cast a bubblehead charm on himself. He'd received a blessing from the merpeople in the wizard tower and could breathe underwater without it, but this water was saturated with dark magic, and he didn't want to be careless. As soon as Matthew entered the flood, animated mummies that had been roused by the dark power rushed toward him. In water, they moved like fish, surprisingly swift. Underwater, lightning spells were most effective. He first conjured countless vines to corral the mummies into a cluster. Then 2 enormous hands of crackling electricity pressed together in a prayer-like motion, striking the gathered mummies. The group instantly turned to charcoal and went still. He dove deeper. Freed from needing to keep pace with Muggle swimmers, he moved much faster and soon reached the cavern beneath the temple. The hollow extended far beyond his sight. Narmer had carved out the space to store a massive reserve of water, and most importantly, to keep an enormous number of mummies. The population below exceeded that of the temple and the residential areas combined. It was a tide of mummies. The living arrivals had awakened them. Like some undead horde in an apocalyptic film, the tide surged toward Matthew. He flicked his wand repeatedly. Beams of lightning erupted from its tip and, upon detonating in the water, became countless electric serpents. Wherever those serpents struck, mummies blackened and sank. An idea struck him, and the wand's tip flared. Chain lightning. A thick bolt lashed out and hit a mummy, but instead of exploding, it kept conducting, jumping from corpse to corpse, 1 to 3, 3 to 9, 9 to 27. The bolt propagated until the spell's magical energy was spent. Every channel the electricity took left a charred body. The water quickly turned murky. "A good spell for clearing mobs," Matthew murmured, pleased. He had already mastered many spells, and occasionally he found ways to improve or even invent new ones in the field. Chain lightning let him channel electricity through multiple enemies efficiently, perfect for hordes. After using it a few times, he had wiped the entire tide of mummies clean. He continued deeper until he reached a small palace-like burial chamber. The chamber itself was kept dry. The surrounding floodwater had been held back. Piles of mundane treasures lay everywhere: pots, tools, ornaments, ordinary objects but invaluable as remnants of an ancient civilization. Matthew packed them all into his pouch. At the chamber's center was a huge stone sarcophagus. Inside that lay a humanoid coffin, only slightly larger than Narmer's later form. Both the stone sarcophagus and the wooden coffin had been opened. This was clearly Narmer's original tomb. The sarcophagus was densely inscribed with ancient hieroglyphs chronicling his deeds. Between the outer sarcophagus and the inner coffin, Narmer had placed his favorite treasures and several alchemical creations. There were also papyrus books among the items. Matthew skimmed them. He couldn't read ancient Egyptian fluently, but he could infer much from the glyphs. A great deal seemed to concern alchemy. One of the books contained material he'd seen before, the same text recorded on a stone tablet he'd viewed in the museum. He still hadn't fully determined why so much water had been stored here, but the books included a schematic of the underground city's structure. Earlier, when the Guardians had combined their power to unleash that terrifying beam, he'd felt the magical energy surge up from the subterranean reservoir. The books were likely to explain it. After he resurfaced, he would ask Professor Smith to translate them. "This hall isn't small," Matthew said, gathering the last artifacts into his pouch. Satisfied that nothing useful remained, he retraced his route and rejoined Luna and the others. He hovered near the hippogriff on the wind wings strapped to his back and asked, "Are you all right?" "We're fine," Luna replied. "Is it over?" Matthew nodded. "I took care of the resurrected Pharaoh Narmer." Professor Smith blurted out, "Were those two constructs also made by you?" "This is just unbelievable." Matthew smiled. "The stone construct and the serpent were both alchemical creations." Professor Smith looked stunned. "What? Isn't alchemy just a scam?" "You've already seen a dark wizard," Matthew said. "Why wouldn't you believe alchemy is real?" "That's true," Smith scratched his head. But a lot of documents about ancient Egyptian alchemy have been unearthed, and scientists have verified them. They aren't magical like people describe." "That's because they don't have magic," Matthew explained. "You need magical power to reproduce those ancient alchemical techniques. Magical power is the foundation of magical craftsmanship." Professor Smith frowned. "If someone has no magical aptitude, is there no way for muggles to use magic? I really want to find something for them." The middle-aged guide interjected, "Actually, we've already violated the International Statute of Secrecy. Things aren't strictly controlled here, and contact between wizards and the muggle public isn't completely severed. But in England, if you keep contacting wizards, the Ministry of Magic will probably notice and erase your memories." Smith went pale. "The International Statute of Secrecy? Will our memories be wiped?" Erasing memories sounded terrifying. Professor Smith grew visibly anxious. Matthew put him at ease. "We can sign a magical agreement to ensure you won't expose the wizarding world. As long as you don't seek out more wizards or spread the word, the ministry won't come knocking." He needed Professor Smith to translate the ancient papyri, so he didn't plan to obliviate him. Besides, Smith might panic otherwise. The translation workload was heavy. The rest of the archaeological team could assist, getting Matthew the translations sooner. The team members nodded and agreed to sign the magical agreement. With the underground city flooded, they couldn't continue their excavation alone, so they decided to leave with Matthew. They had, however, taken pottery and stone tools from the residential area, so they wouldn't return empty-handed. They followed the path back to the surface. When they emerged, the camp was chaotic. A golden pillar had erupted from the ground during the battle, and most of the camels and luggage had vanished. One team member had been disabled, though his wound was peculiar and not fatal. The desert had no signal. They could not contact the outside world. Perhaps because of the golden light, their satellite phones had also failed. With communications cut and only a few camels left, those who'd stayed on the surface panicked. They argued about fleeing, but with so few beasts left, they couldn't all go, and the group was at an impasse. Matthew stared at the crater. The power of that spell was fearsome. It reached all the way to the surface, he said. After Professor Smith had the whole story, he looked to Matthew. "Black, can magic solve the problems we're facing?" Everyone on the surface turned to look at Smith. A young member protested, "Professor Smith, what are you suggesting?" "It's a small matter. Matthew replied, then produced a small bottle of fairy spring and poured it over the injured muggle's wound. Flesh and bone writhed as under a gentle tide. The man's legs gradually regenerated. The onlookers gaped. "A miracle," someone cried. A religious believer crossed himself. After treating the wound, Matthew gave each member an obliviate, including Isis and the middle-aged guide. The fairy spring's effect was astonishing. A potion capable of regenerating limbs so quickly would be remarkable even in the wizarding world. The team no longer remembered that anyone had been hurt. Only the previously injured man noticed a slight oddness in his legs. Matthew had restored his pants and shoes to pristine condition with transfiguration. Before they left, everyone signed the magical non-disclosure agreement. Then the group departed, riding camels made of sand, and headed away from the flooded site. After the trip to Egypt, the summer vacation was winding down. Matthew and Luna boarded the cruise ship to return home. Luna cupped her hands like a megaphone and yelled toward the beach, "Isis, goodbye." Isis waved energetically. "I'll come to Hogwarts to find you guys." The ship slid into the mist, and Isis's figure soon disappeared. Back in their cabin, Matthew began inventorying what they'd brought from the ancient Egyptian ruins. First were the scrolls and codices, records of Egyptian mythology, history, rituals, and alchemy. Matthew couldn't read the ancient script, so he made copies and asked Professor Smith and the archaeological team to translate them. They would work through the texts as quickly as they could. Besides the books, the rest of the hall was a collection of enchanted artifacts. There were the jewels recovered from Pharaoh Narmer, the floating three-sphere implements used by the three priestess sisters, and assorted funerary items pulled from the sarcophagus in the underwater tomb. Many of these were clearly pinnacle works of alchemy from that age. With a thought, Matthew apparated back to the wizard tower, directly into the alchemy workshop. Zero, help me analyze the functions and effects of these enchanted artifacts, he ordered the tower spirit. He didn't want to probe their effects personally. Many of the funerary items were likely cursed, and experimenting alone could be dangerous. Using the alchemy workshop to analyze them was both efficient and safe. For that giant construct wreckage, only analyze its alchemical craftsmanship and document it, he added. He had also brought back the ruined frame of Pharaoh Narmer's giant soldier. Of such a massive construct would have extremely complex craftsmanship and high value. Zero set the workshop's processes into motion. While the tower spirit worked, Matthew went up to the 5th floor. After taking the bio workshop on the 4th floor, he'd been blocked from progressing because the entire 5th floor had been occupied by a fleshy tumor wall, an organ-like mass that grew like unchecked cancer. The walls were made of proliferating tissue with extraordinary regenerative abilities. Worse, they absorbed magical energy. Attacking them with magic only made them grow. Even fiend fire didn't burn them away. It made them bigger. Zero had cut power to the upper floors and isolated them to prevent that mass from spreading into the tower's core systems. The tumor tissue didn't attack Matthew or the constructs. It simply sat there and passively absorbed magical energy. Matthew had also tested leaving magical creatures on the mass. They were gradually assimilated into mindless, tumor-like husks. He discovered that non-magically produced strong acids were effective. They could inhibit the tissue's regenerative capacity, so he had the tireless constructs use strong acid to clear the 5th floor. Now several constructs were still busy. The fleshy walls that had once filled the space were nearly gone. Matthew stopped a busy blonde golem. "Oriana, how's the cleanup? How much longer?" 96% cleared, she replied. "Expected completion in 2 to 3 days." Matthew nodded. "Keep a 0.01% sample of the tissue and send it to the bioworkshop for storage." He hadn't found a use for the tumor yet, but its ability to neutralize magical energy merited study. Its regenerative power was so great that a tiny sample could grow enormous if supplied with magical energy. He walked through the cleared area. The tumor organisms had smashed and overrun the former apprentice area. Only fragments remained of the places where Emond, the ancestor of time, had once taught. Before the Plane War, Emond had stopped taking apprentices. He had intended the 6th floor to hold the data cores for the tower spirits. The bio workshop, alchemy workshop, potion workshop, and great library had separate spirits with their data cores up there. Given what the 5th floor looked like, Matthew assumed the upper floors were in bad shape too. Zero's voice sounded in his ear. Analysis complete. Results transmitted. A translucent display appeared, listing the artifact analyses. First, the Pharaoh's scepter. It functioned like a magical focus, amplifying spell power and increasing control over magical energy. It was also the control core for the giant soldier, and like other powerful foci, it seemed to possess personal characteristics that made it unsuitable for Matthew. The Pharaoh's crown was another alchemical accoutrement. Wearing it conferred majesty that made ordinary people instinctively feel worshipful toward the wearer. The effect, however, had little power against wizards. It was primarily intended for non-magical folk. In a feudal society, wearing it could elevate someone to emperor. The gold jewelry had varied effects. The Pharaoh's necklace granted flight. The impressive aerial displays Narmer used didn't come from his own magic, but from the necklace. The gold belt functioned like an early undetectable extension charm, but its craftsmanship was primitive. Its internal space was only about the size of a computer case and thus of no practical value to Matthew. Bottles and vials inside were sent to the potion workshop for analysis, though Matthew suspected potions stored for thousands of years would be mostly inert. Of all the Pharaoh's gear, Matthew cared most about the two bracelets. He had seen the right-hand bracelet in action. When he attacked Narmer, a pillar of golden light enveloped the pharaoh and his attacks fell harmless. The bracelet created a localized isolation field. External attacks entering the field were effectively shifted into a different space and couldn't hit the wearer. The drawback was that while the field was active, the wearer's attacks could not reach the outside world. According to Zero's analysis, the golden light lasted only a few seconds per activation, and the bracelet could be used 5 times within 3 days. If Matthew had been able to attack a few more times, he could have tested it further, but the basilisk curse had ended the fight quickly. The left-hand bracelet was a different kind of protection, rare and focused on the mind. It recorded the wearer's normal state of consciousness and, upon detecting abnormalities, actively tried to awaken the wearer. In some cases, it could keep someone conscious by forcibly returning them to their baseline state. Matthew suspected Narmer might have worn it as part of some revival regimen. Curious, Matthew slipped that bracelet onto his own wrist. It emitted a weak wave of energy that reached his psychic barrier, but was blocked. Since his mind and soul were housed inside a protective shell after being promoted to second-level wizard, the energy couldn't penetrate. Once he confirmed the wave was harmless, he relaxed the shell and let the wave reach his consciousness. The bracelet's pulses swept through his mind and returned to the bracelet, then continued to emit at a steady frequency. At first, he felt nothing unusual. He simulated being under a mental attack by circulating his magical energy, and the bracelet responded. Its waves grew stronger, a cool sensation spreading down to the depths of his psyche, sharpening his thinking. Matthew found it interesting. Because of his barrier, the bracelet had little long-term effect on him, but the wave-based method of mental influence was something he had no equivalent for among his spells. If he could understand the ancient Egyptian magical system better, he might reverse engineer that wave release technique. Zero, can you fabricate those 3-sphere floating implements in a form suitable for me? He asked. He wanted a few of the hovering sphere tools to act as additional spellcasting mediums. Yes, Zero answered. Core materials will need to be replaced with components from your magical foci. Matthew produced some of his own foci. Deconstruct them and make me several 3-sphere devices. The rest of the funerary objects from the underwater tomb proved hazardous. Many bore curses, confirming Matthew's caution about not activating them casually. An hourglass carved with a jackal-headed figure never seemed to run out of sand. When inverted, sand poured from the jackal's mouth and turned into precious desert spring water, but the holder's stomach would soon fill with sand. A clear crystal allowed one to peer into another's memories, but every use came with a curse that progressively erased the user's own memories until nothing remained. A key could let someone enter another's dreams, but a rash user who entered someone else's dream could become trapped there forever. Some items were benign by modern standards, though they still had value as ancient artifacts and could fetch high prices. When Matthew finished cataloging everything, he apparated back to the cruise ship. Luna, this is for you. He held out the bracelet with the awakening effect. Let me put it on you. The bracelet was flashy, too ornate for Luna's usual taste, but it was useful. With it on, she would be much harder to control with spells like Imperio. Luna blinked as Matthew fastened the jewel-encrusted band around her wrist. Is this the Pharaoh's bracelet? Yes, it has a mental protection enchantment and will help prevent you from being harmed. A warm, fleeting sensation passed over Matthew's face as Luna smiled at him. After a blink and a small spatial shift, they arrived at Luna's house. The ship had returned to England, and they apparated home. Luna unlocked the door and called inside. Dad, we're back! Footsteps hurried down the stairs. Xenophilius Lovegood appeared in his mismatched robes and an apron. You're back? He gave Luna a careful once-over. It was the first time she'd gone so far, and he'd been anxious. You've gotten thinner, he murmured. Luna laughed. How am I thinner? The food on the cruise ship was delicious. Xenophilius smiled faintly, but wasn't convinced. Like many parents, he worried whenever his child was away. Nothing outside is as good as home-cooked food, he said. I knew you were coming back, so I prepared dinner. Matthew offered, Do you need any help? You two clear the dining table, Xenophilius said. It'll be ready once the beef stew is done. 285. Harry's expectations. 11:45. Only 15 minutes until noon. Harry glanced up the clock on the wall and muttered to himself. His heart beat in time with the ticking second hand. Since waking that morning, he'd been counting down the minutes. For Harry, today was the true start of summer. He had an appointment with Senior Matthew. At noon, Matthew would come to get him and take him to deal with the curse Lord Voldemort had left inside him. Once that curse was dealt with, he wouldn't have to stay here any longer. He'd spend the summer at the Weasleys and with Sirius. And beyond that, the Quidditch World Cup he was so looking forward to awaited him. If Professor Dumbledore hadn't said that the 37 his mother left on him needed the house's presence to be sustained, he wouldn't have wanted to stay an instant longer. Harry hurriedly put the freshly washed dishes into the cupboard. Vernon had gone back to his room to rest after breakfast. Petunia had gone shopping with friends and left all the housework to Harry. Dudley, of course, had nothing to do. He was sprawled on the sofa playing his game console. Hearing the cupboard door open and close, Dudley called out, "Finished already? Did you wash them properly?" "They're clean, cleaner than your face," Harry shot back, then ignored Dudley's muttered rage and ran upstairs. Ever since his godfather Sirius had come to speak with the Dursleys, things had improved a little. He no longer had to live in the cupboard under the stairs. He had his own room. His suitcase lay open on the bed. He'd packed it the moment the owl from Senior Matthew had arrived last night. He flipped through it once more to be sure he hadn't forgotten anything. He had checked several times already that morning. It was a way to keep busy. Idle time made the clock crawl. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang downstairs. Harry had left his bedroom door open so he wouldn't miss Matthew and so that the Dursleys couldn't make it difficult if a visitor arrived. He snapped his suitcase shut, shoved it into the div one Matthew had given him, and hurried downstairs. Vernon, in his bathrobe, was at the door to answer it. "Who is it?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Dursley." Matthew's voice was calm and polite. Harry pushed past Vernon, who was blocking the doorway. "Good afternoon, Senior Matthew," Harry greeted. Matthew smiled. "Good afternoon, Harry." Vernon's expression hardened. His big, fleshy hand grabbed Harry's shoulder and shoved him back. "We don't welcome freaks' friends in this house. You can leave." Matthew pulled a letter from his pocket and smiled. "This is from Professor Dumbledore. I'm here to take Harry." "A letter from Dumbledore?" Vernon scoffed and waved it away. "I'm not reading it. Harry's not going anywhere. He's staying here." Dudley appeared after hearing the commotion, and the hallway quickly became crowded. Harry tried to speak up. "This was arranged before the holidays." Professor Dumbledore agreed. "Dumbledore's not the boss here," Dudley barked. "You're not leaving." Vernon rejected anything connected to wizards outright. Dudley, as usual, just wanted to make Harry miserable. Harry felt his temper rising, but before he could argue, Matthew spoke quietly. "Mr. Dursley, I'm not asking for your opinion." "I am informing you," Vernon began, "so you don't think Harry's gone missing." "Who do you think you Dudley tried to shout, but his voice vanished. A zipper had formed across his mouth. He couldn't open it. Vernon froze. "What did you do to Dudley? Aren't Hogwarts students forbidden from using 38s outside?" Matthew shrugged, innocent. "I did not use a 38. Vernon didn't understand and, terrified, could only plead, "Take him away. Just change Dudley back. You can take Harry anywhere you want." Matthew's voice was gentle. "It seems Mr. Dursley will cooperate after all." Without any visible gesture, Dudley's mouth unzipped and returned to normal. He groped at his lips and stumbled back into the house to hide. Vernon pushed Harry out the door, said nothing, and slammed it so hard the walls rattled. Matthew put a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Let's go, Harry." In an instant, space seemed to twist around them, and they were gone. In the next moment, they stood on a deserted lakeshore. "Senior Matthew, that was amazing," Harry breathed. "Was that transfiguration? You didn't even move, and you made Dudley's mouth shut." Matthew nodded. "That was transfiguration. Human transfiguration is complex and dangerous, especially when the target is a wizard or a magical creature. Don't attempt it unless you are certain of the outcome." Harry's eyes shone. "Your transfiguration is incredible. I hope my transfiguration will be half as good someday." Matthew turned to the lake, spoke the incantation he used to communicate with Avalon, and the surface began to thicken with mist. It rolled across the water until a gray fog hid everything. "There," Harry said, pointing to a darker patch in the haze. The darkness resolved into a wooden boat that drifted forward, and a figure in a white gown stood at its prow. As the boat drew closer, Harry could see her clearly, a black-haired girl with the faint roundness of youth still at her cheeks. Her hair fell to her waist in natural curls that framed her face. Emerald-set silver earrings caught the light. Her cream-colored dress had puffed sleeves that revealed fair, slender forearms. She looked at Harry appraisingly with bright, lively eyes, then stepped off the boat and walked toward them. She wore no shoes, but her bare feet did not sink into the water. She seemed to walk on it. In Matthew's perception, a thin layer of 37 clung to the soles of her feet. She halted before Matthew and smiled. "Teacher, long time no see," Matthew grinned. "Irina, you've grown. Your control of 37 is impressive." "Anyone would grow after so many years," Irina pouted. "Teacher, you've been back in this timeline a while now. Why haven't you come to see me sooner?" Matthew rubbed his head. "I returned earlier than you'd expect, but everything was different and I had far too much to catch up on." "When did you come back?" Irina pressed. Since Matthew's return involved her indirectly, his Transfiguration clone portrait had once stayed at Hogwarts, she didn't know exactly when he had re-entered the timeline. "I came back before the start of last school year," Matthew said. Irina rolled her eyes. It had been almost a year. She glanced at Harry. "And you only remembered Avalon because you had something to deal with, right?" Matthew nodded. "I came to Avalon for a specific purpose. Man, since you used a clone at Hogwarts for so long, you should know of Harry." "I know of the famous Harry Potter," Irina laughed. "I'm Irina Black, Teacher Matthew's disciple, and Lady of the Lake of Avalon." "Hello," Harry said awkwardly. "Ms. Irina." Hearing Irina's titles and Matthew's involvement made Harry more astonished. The way to remove the curse might be in the legendary Avalon. Matthew had a way to bring him there, and Irina was the Lady of the Lake. Matthew explained, "There is a hidden Horcrux of Lord Voldemort inside Harry." Irina added, "Voldemort's Horcrux is bound very closely to him. Using ordinary methods, you can't remove or destroy Voldemort's Horcrux without damaging Harry's soul," Matthew continued. "But the fairy spring in Avalon can. The freshly flowing spring has an extraordinary effect. It can expel the Horcrux from Harry's body." Irina turned to Harry. "Potter, if Teacher brought you here, you are allowed into Avalon, but we cannot have Avalon disturbed. Before you enter, you must make an unbreakable vow to never reveal this secret." Harry nodded and made the vow with Irina. Thin golden threads wrapped around their hands and then vanished, binding the promise. After that, the three of them boarded the wooden boat, which drifted into the mist. For a while, all they could see was fog. Slowly, the haze thinned, and an island came into view. When the boat reached the shore, a vast oak forest stretched beyond the lakeside. After 1,000 years, Matthew stepped into Avalon again. Irina watched him walking, her expression distant with memory. "Teacher, the last time we landed here, it wasn't nearly that smooth," Matthew smiled. "That time the boat even capsized." Irina thought of those who had been with them then and sighed at how much had changed. She led them through the oak trees to the fairy spring. The pool's water shone golden. 100-meter-long fairy queen lay sleeping there. Golden spring water flowed continually from a wound at her heart. Matthew said, "Harry, this is the fairy spring. Bathe in the fresh water and it will expel the curse from your body." Harry stared, amazed. "Is that spring, the blood flowing from her?" Irina nodded. "She is the fairy queen, the oldest of the fairies. They say she was here at Avalon's beginning." "Perhaps Avalon's birth is tied to her," Matthew added. Irina agreed. "I've thought that too, but it's so long ago now, even the current fairy race knows little of it." Matthew led Harry beneath the fairy queen and helped him bathe in the gushing water. He took out the zero he used to store fairy spring water, poured out the stale water in it, and refilled the container with fresh water. Irina watched, surprised. "Teacher, you really packed that much last time? The spring water loses its effect after leaving Avalon. Packing this much seems unnecessary." Matthew had noticed that too. Less than a month out of Avalon, it loses its power to purge the dark arts and curses and to purify. It only heals wounds. After 6 months, even that diminishes. I estimated any healing effect might last 2 or 3 years. Back then, you were separated from us, and I didn't know if you'd be able to stay here as a fairy or if I'd ever have another chance to return. So I brought more than I probably should have. Irina was speechless. More than you'd ever finish by drinking it every day, surely. Harry bathed in the spring and felt warm flood through him. A layer of black mist formed over his face, condensing into a smoky, noseless visage fighting on his skin, screaming without a nose. The image writhed and then hurled itself up into the air. A flash of lightning struck, and the noseless face was swallowed by light. Matthew stepped back. The Horcrux had been expelled from Harry. Harry collapsed, fainted by the strain. Matthew pulled several potions from his pocket, drinks said to steady and mend the soul, and administered them. Let him stay in the spring water a while, Matthew told Irina. The spring repairs hidden injuries and purifies impurities in 37. Irina, he said after a moment, let's walk a little. Since we're here, I'd like to see Merlin. He's become an oak. 286. Harley Potter. The oak tree Merlin had become was a little larger than it had been 1,000 years ago, but it had stopped growing centuries ago, as if it had reached its limit. After giving the time crystal to Matthew, Merlin's prophetic edge had dulled. Their exchange was now little more than friendly greetings and small talk. After visiting Merlin, Matthew and Irina sat and reminisced about the past. Did Kadir stay in Avalon for a while after that? Matthew asked. Yes. At first I felt bored, so I begged Caroline and Merlin to let my brother come to Avalon. They agreed, and I brought him here. But after a while, he said he couldn't leave his girlfriend outside, so he left Avalon, Irina replied. Oh, Kadir had a girlfriend back then? Yes. A few years later, he married her, and they had children. Did you ever try to have Kadir bathe in the fairy spring to gain immortality and keep you company in Avalon? I tried, but my brother refused. He wanted life in the outside world more. He did bathe once and then left Avalon, but the effects of the spring faded quickly after he left. He lost his immortality and grew old and died alongside his wife. Matthew asked, what about the other lady of the lake? Why haven't I seen her? He had brought Harry into Avalon, yet the other lady of the lake seemed surprisingly indifferent. Caroline's asleep, Irina said. After becoming a lady of the lake, you can't leave Avalon for long. Staying here is boring, so we spend a lot of time in dreams. Merlin taught us how to dwell in dream space. What, like living in Tsukuyomi? Matthew thought. Why aren't those gauzy wings on your back anymore? Matthew asked, remembering that a lady of the lake normally had delicate ribbon-like wings. Irina spun around, lifting her skirt a little, and grinned. Ta-da! I turned them into clothes. The wings are part of you. Transfiguration? Matthew rubbed his chin. Your transfiguration has improved a lot. You haven't wasted your time. Irina wagged her finger playfully. It's more than that, teacher. She opened her palm, and as if out of nothing, a ball of fire ignited. Matthew's pupils shrank. He recognized what he was seeing at once. Air transfiguration, he murmured. Molecular-level transfiguration. Irina had transfigured air into fire. Matthew had thought the next step would be manipulating matter at the molecular level, but he hadn't reached it. He had only guessed at it. He could transfigure tangible things like fog, which is composed of droplets, but not something as formless as air. Now Irina was doing exactly that. Irina, you've passed me in transfiguration, Matthew said with a smile. She had to be excellent. Given time, it was natural she would surpass him. Irina beamed. Do you want to learn, teacher? I'll teach you. She had been waiting for praise like this. Matthew felt relieved. He had hesitated to give Irina the meditation method when he left the ancient era because he didn't know how future Irina would respond. Now it was clear. She still recognized him as a teacher. Of course I want to learn, he said. Irina demonstrated air transfiguration with enthusiasm. Under the guidance of her technique, the invisible air twisted and reshaped itself into visible forms. She also pulled out detailed transfiguration notes and handed them to Matthew. Given time, he would have found the same path, but her notes saved him from many wrong turns. Matthew found a rock, sat, and leafed through her notes. Time passed quietly in Avalon. At the fairy spring, Harry awoke with a soft groan. While he slept, he'd felt warm and sheltered, as if returned to his mother's womb. He woke refreshed and light, an unfamiliar ease settling over him. Feels like I slept for ages, he thought as he climbed out of the pool. He reached to wipe his eyes and froze. Why has my hair grown so long? His voice had changed too, clearer, more melodious. Panic prickled up his spine. He pulled a small mirror from his pocket and stared at the reflection. "Mom," he whispered. At his aunt's house, he'd once seen a childhood photo of his mother. The girl in the mirror looked like that photo, but not exactly. His mother had long dark red hair and emerald green eyes. The girl in the mirror had long black hair and bright emerald eyes. Black hair and emerald eyes. Harry touched his face, and the girl in the mirror did the same. His stomach dropped. The face in the glass was his. He was not looking at his mother. He was looking at himself, and he was a girl. No way. I miss my mom. That's different. I didn't ask to look like her. He started to check his body frantically. His face went white. Fabric-like gauzy things had grown on his back, and there was weight at his chest. The thing between his legs was gone. He had become female. "Ah, what's happening?" Harry screamed. "Quite a harvest," Matthew said, finishing the notes and patting Irina's head. "You've worked very hard, Irina." Her notes had boosted Matthew's understanding of transfiguration to a new level. He extended his right hand. Lightning sparked in his palm. This lightning was produced by transfiguration, not by a lightning spell. He had mastered air transfiguration. Irina looked at the crackling light and said in admiration, "You picked it up so quickly. You must have been only one step away, teacher." Matthew smiled. "Your notes were a huge help. Who knows how long that bottleneck would have lasted?" Irina hesitated, then asked, "Teacher, would you stay in Avalon? If it were you, Merlin and Kadir would be delighted." Matthew shook his head. "I cannot stay here." "Don't you want immortality?" Irina pressed. Having lived so long, she had few close people left. She didn't want Matthew to disappear after a few decades or a century like her brother. Matthew smiled. "Irina, there's more than one way to extend a life." He didn't want to become a Lady of the Lake. He'd already reached second-level wizard early and had no urgent fear of death. Becoming a Lady of the Lake imposed heavy restrictions. Merlin had become an immobile oak, and a Lady of the Lake couldn't stray far from the Fairy Queen's domain. That kind of immortality might not be worth it. For example, raising your life level is another way. He pulled a worn meditation method manual from his pocket. This is the core of another system, the meditation method. Through it, you can break through to a higher life level. In Matthew's view, Merlin becoming an oak and Irina becoming a Lady of the Lake were both ways of raising life level to break lifespan limits. The costs were too high for his liking. He'd learned of a more conventional and reliable path, the cultivation-style system of the wizarding world. The meditation method had been modified by the Tower Spirit. It required materials and potions, which the Tower Spirit had adjusted to things available in this world. You haven't been in touch with the outside world lately, so you might not know about what's been hotly discussed there. Runic magic, Matthew explained. The meditation method is the core of the runic magic system. I've published some pieces on runic magic, but the meditation method itself isn't public yet, he added. Irina's eyes shone. Is this your new research, teacher? The meditation method can actually raise life levels? I thought I'd already surpassed you, but I'm still far from it. Matthew checked his pocket watch. Harry should have turned into Harley by now, right? He felt a bit mischievous. He knew the fairy spring's assimilation effect was strong when it flowed out. If someone bathed long enough, even a man could become a Lady of the Lake. Sirius had exaggerated some details, but Matthew had a general idea why Snape fixated on Harry. Snape and Harry's mother had been childhood sweethearts. When a newcomer won her affection, Snape had been crushed. He resented James Potter for taking Lily away. Snape's harsh treatment of Harry had roots in that old pain, and Harry's resemblance to his father made things worse. If the spring has cleansed whatever hid your true form, Harry will thank me, Matthew said. It's got healing powers, cleansing wounds and impurities. Irina giggled. I wonder how he'll take it. Matthew shrugged. Harry's strong. He'll adapt. From the oak grove they heard Harry's wail. Irina cupped her hands and called, Potter, are you awake? Harry froze and hurried to straighten his clothes. Matthew and Irina strolled over from the tree. Matthew put on a mock blank expression. "Who are you? Why are you wearing Harry's robes?" Harry clung to a splinter of hope. "Senior Matthew, I'm Harry. I don't know what happened. I just woke up like this." "You're really Harry?" Matthew examined him closely, then adopted a grave tone. "Maybe." Harry latched onto the implication. "Did you find out why?" Matthew lowered his voice. "Harry, perhaps you were originally a girl, and Voldemort's soul fragment hid your true form. The fairy spring purged Voldemort's fragment from your body, so your true appearance has returned." Harry, he had never imagined that after being a boy for over 10 years, he might actually have been a girl. "But I like girls. I like Senior Cho Chang." His voice trembled. "Senior Matthew, is there any way to change me back?" It was a secret he'd kept deep inside him. From the moment he'd seen Cho on the pitch, he'd been smitten, but he'd always felt unworthy and kept his feelings to himself. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Matthew said gently. "A Horcrux is a horrific bit of dark magic, and creating one from a living person is extremely rare. I haven't researched that much. Also, there's some news that may be very unfortunate for you." Matthew's tone turned matter-of-fact. "Cho Chang of Ravenclaw and Cedric Diggory of Hufflepuff are passionately in love." Color drained from Harry's face in an instant. He clutched his head and screamed, "Ah, don't do this to me!" Matthew told Harry the truth. "So if I leave Avalon, the fairy spring's effects will gradually wear off?" Harry let out a long, relieved breath. It wasn't permanent, just something he'd have to live with for a while. "How long will it take?" Irina held up one finger. "A day?" She shook her head. "A week?" She still shook her head. "A month." "School starts in a month," Harry burst out. "If he hadn't changed back by then, wouldn't everyone at Hogwarts know?" Irina smiled. "At least a month. A few weeks after you leave Avalon, the traits tied to the Lady of the Lake will begin to fade. The translucent wings on your back should be gone after about a month. Other bodily changes could take 3 to 6 months to fully recover." "It takes that long?" Harry pressed his hands to his head, struggling to accept it. "The fairy spring's magic is powerful," Matthew said gently, "but it was the only practical way to remove the Horcrux linked so closely to you. If we'd tried something else, the cost might have been far higher." Harry thought about it, and grudgingly, it made sense. The spring had eliminated a hidden danger that could have cost him dearly. Compared to that risk, this temporary change was nothing. He was Harry Potter. He'd faced Voldemort. A few months of an awkward body was manageable. "But how do I explain it to people?" Matthew gave the answer he'd already prepared. "Simple. Say you drank a bad potion, an experiment gone wrong. The Horcrux situation won't be made public. Only Dumbledore and Snape know. They won't pry, and they'll back up the story." When Matthew had briefed Dumbledore and Snape about the Horcrux, he hadn't explained his method in detail. They had accepted that some secrets would remain secret. Harry nodded. "So if anyone asks, I say I drank a faulty potion." Cases like this happen in the wizarding world. Potion mishaps, failed experiments. People will accept that, Matthew said. "I'll help hide the wings so no one notices." Irina produced a shimmering veil and tapped Harry's back. He felt a tickle, then discovered the gauze-like covering was concealing the translucent wings with a gentle glamour. Matthew smiled. "That should do it. You shouldn't have to go back to the Dursleys, right?" "I'm going to the Weasleys," Harry said quickly. He could not bear the thought of the Dursleys seeing him like this. Molly Weasley opened the door and went pale at the sight. "What, Harry? Oh, goodness. How did you end up like this? You look just like Lily. You drank a dodgy potion during an experiment? You shouldn't brew that sort of thing by yourself. Are you all right? Will you be able to change back? If Professor Snape says it will pass, then it should be fine." Molly's relief was palpable, but she was also oddly wistful. Another daughter would have been welcome in the burly, boisterous Weasley household. "The children went fishing and should be back soon," she told Matthew. "Stay for dinner, and call Sirius to come see his goddaughter." Once inside, Harry felt oddly self-conscious and sat up straight like a proper young lady, a little nervous in the unfamiliar role. He hoped Ron wouldn't be too shocked. Playful voices carried from the yard. "Only one bucket's empty. George, it's your fault. You threw that rock and scared the fish. You'd have lost it anyway. Your line snapped." It doesn't matter. Ginny caught it. Who says? The door swung and Fred went in ahead, spotting Matthew at the table. Boss, you're here. Matthew and Harry? Ron followed, expecting Matthew's guest. He glanced past Matthew and stopped dead. The person sitting there was not his usual or familiar friend, but an extraordinarily beautiful young woman. Ron's face flushed and he stammered, Hello, beautiful lady. I'm Ron Weasley. For a moment he was sure he was in love. His mind raced. What would their future children be like? If it was a boy, Harry. If a girl, Hermione. He watched her jump down from the chair and saw panic flash across her face. Ron, what are you talking about? I'm Harry. The beautiful young woman's voice was clear and pleasant. Ron hadn't been listening to a word she'd said. Her voice alone had knocked him senseless. He blinked and finally focused. What did you say? I'm Harry Potter. I turned into a girl after drinking a bad potion. Her anxious expression was oddly endearing. Ron's attention stuck to her face, barely hearing the words. Then, with a clatter, Ginny's iron bucket fell to the ground, and a fat fish shot out and slapped onto the hard earth, thrashing its tail. Ginny froze, staring at Harry. How could Harry be like this? Her crush, was it over before it had even begun? Is this true? She demanded, trembling. Matthew shrugged. As you can see. George poked his head around the doorway. Are we getting another sister? Harley Potter? Ginny's face went blank. The boy she liked had been transformed into a girl. She felt heartbreak and confusion and anger all at once. She fled upstairs to be alone. Dinner at the Burrow was loud and warm that evening. Besides Harry and Matthew, Sirius and Remus had come. Remus had even brought Nymphadora Tonks. He and Tonks had made their relationship public, and wedding talk buzzed around them. Because more people had arrived, they pushed the table out into the yard. Arthur carried a steaming pot of fish soup to the table. Kids, fish soup's ready. I heard Ginny caught the fish. Well done. Ginny barely responded, keeping her eyes trained on the black-haired girl across from her. Harry's new appearance complicated everything. Ginny had fled to her room without hearing the full explanation and was convinced this change might be permanent. Ron, sitting opposite Ginny and beside Harry, felt torn. The girl he'd fallen for in a glance was actually his best friend. He'd fallen in love and been broken-hearted in the space of an hour. He wished, briefly, that Harry wouldn't change back. It was a selfish thought, and it left him feeling guilty. Sirius ladled soup into a bowl for Harry. I didn't expect James and Lily's wish to come true this way. Remus smiled. They did say they'd like a daughter. Harry took the bowl. There was a small, stubborn acceptance in him now. He'd change back eventually, so he might as well let people think what they wanted. He blew on a spoonful and sipped. Ron, watching, pinched his thigh to stop himself staring. If he looked any longer, he knew he'd fall for Harry all over again. He got up abruptly, pretending to reach for more soup. Harry looked up, spoon paused. Her eyes, large, green, bright, were like twin pools of clear water, reflecting the sky. Ron couldn't meet them and forced his head away. I'm just getting some fish soup, he muttered, fumbling the ladle and spilling most of it back in the pot. You're so clumsy, Molly scolded, snatching the bowl and serving him properly. Then she offered Harry a tender fillet. Eat up. Harry took it politely. Ginny watched quietly, heart pinched. Even as a girl, Harry was still Harry, polite, brave, kind. Ginny tried to tell herself that nothing important had changed, but it was hard. Later, after bathing, Harry sat on the bed in Ginny's room, towel around her shoulders, fingers working through long black hair. Long hair is such a hassle, she complained. She'd tried to chop it off once, but it grew back quickly. From the other bed, Ron said, Long hair looks really good. Harry stopped, surprised. What? Ron backtracked, flustered. You smell really nice. No, I mean your hair smells nice. Even from across the room, Ron could pick up the fresh, floral scent. Harry lifted a lock and breathed it in. Is that Ginny's shampoo? Is it? Ron said. I never noticed it before. Hermione'll be here soon, right? She'll see me like this, Harry sighed. It's inevitable. It'll last a while. She's coming next week, Ron said. She should still be traveling with her parents. They had planned to stay at the Burrow and then go to the Quidditch World Cup together. Harry took out a book to keep busy. Ron used it as a shield and sneakily watched Harry read. Upstairs in her own room, Ginny hugged the pillow and kicked at her sheets. What should I do? Should I keep liking Harry? She whispered to herself. mind in knots. When she'd handed Harry the shampoo, she'd had time to confirm Harry had truly become a girl. But that hadn't changed what Ginny felt. Harry's bravery, intelligence, strength, optimism, gentleness, they were still there. She forced herself to believe that. A week later, Hermione arrived and opened the door in a single, shocked exclamation. "What? You're Harry?" Hermione's face was an open mouth of astonishment. "It's true," Harry said, resigned. "I turned into a girl after a bad potion." "Why didn't you write?" Hermione asked, aghast. Harry put hands on hips. "Hard to explain in a letter. Besides, I wanted to see your reaction." Hermione stepped closer, reaching out to check. Harry blushed and reflexively stepped back. "Don't touch!" Ron, jammed between them, was utterly frozen, like someone struck by a stunning spell, staring blankly as his two friends bickered. Hermione's expression shifted from shock to professional curiosity. "Even your body's changed. It's been a week," she said. "What happened exactly? What potion did you brew?" Harry swallowed. "I was trying to make polyjuice potion. Something went wrong while I was brewing it." Hermione whipped out a notebook. "Polyjuice? I know how that's done. Describe the situation when you brewed it. What ingredients? What went wrong? Maybe we can find the cause." Harry broke out in a sweat. He'd made the whole thing up. He forced a smile. "I forgot the details." Hermione drew in a sharp breath. "You can forget that? You drank an experimental potion without being able to explain what you'd done. Do you realize how dangerous that is? You could have been poisoned." Matthew put in the effort and finally found the place Slytherin had mentioned. "It looks like one of Slytherin's descendants has already been here," he murmured. It was a hidden vault, and he found a mark at the entrance, not Slytherin's. The symbol was oddly familiar, a snake coiled around a skull. The Death Eater mark? He wondered, studying it closely. Above the skull, someone had written Tom Marvolo Riddle. The mark differed from the modern Death Eater brand. Whereas the later mark's snake extended outward from the skull, this one coiled tightly around it. "So this is Voldemort's old name. He must have discovered this place when he was young," Matthew said, remembering what Dumbledore had told him of Tom Riddle. Voldemort disappeared for a time after school. By the time he reappeared to meet Dumbledore, he was already that noseless horror. If so, he likely found this vault during that gap after graduation, he figured. Slytherin had left the location of this vault using the 15. He had also left riddle-like clues for any clever descendant to solve. A bright enough heir could use the 31s to find the vault. Tom Riddle, Voldemort, counted as a Slytherin descendant, and in his youth he was clever enough to meet the conditions. Matthew stepped into the vault. Although Voldemort had beaten him here, Slytherin had said the information inside could not be taken away. He soon understood what Slytherin meant. Countless white threads floated in the air. This vault was a gigantic pensieve. The threads were Slytherin's memories, his research and experiments stored as memories in the vault. A pensieve this large, even among modern alchemists, only someone like Nicholas Flamel could make one, Matthew thought. He suspected this 44 pensieve had Ravenclaw involvement. Alchemy was not Slytherin's specialty. The memories weren't scattered randomly. Experiments and studies of the same kind clustered together. Matthew reached out and picked a memory. The lab blurred, and he was suddenly inside Slytherin's laboratory 1,000 years ago. Slytherin wore black 38 robes and 39 hide gloves, holding a sharp blade over a workbench. On it lay a beating lump of flesh, unusually tough. Slytherin hacked at it with great effort, then set down the knife and recorded lines of data. His conclusion read, "A dragon heart transplanted into a giant becomes tougher." The record's title, Dragon Heart Transplantation Test. Matthew watched the control results comparing dragon hearts transplanted into different magical creatures. He chose another memory. Same lab, Slytherin dissecting two similar creatures on the bench. Both had gray skin, long ears, and short statures. The left one had hair and a longer, more curved nose. The right one was hairless and had drooping ears. Matthew recognized them, a goblin and a house elf. The notes, experiment observing anatomical differences between goblins and house elves. Slytherin's observations were anatomical and thorough. He dissected and compared their structures. Their anatomies were very similar. Slytherin's conclusion: house elves are goblins domesticated by humans, a relationship akin to wolves and dogs. Another memory showed a woman of extraordinary beauty on the workbench. The notes read, "Experiment exploring the source of Vila charm." Matthew had seen Vila before. Their allure was a kind of magical ability. From Slytherin's research, he watched the formulation of amortentia. Amortentia was Slytherin's research, Matthew realized. The origins of many ancient potions are lost to time. Amortentia turned out to be one of Slytherin's discoveries. After watching several more memories, Matthew understood how Voldemort had closed the gap with Dumbledore so quickly. Slytherin's archive was a treasure trove. His interests were vast and ranged across many species and disciplines. Voldemort had used Slytherin's biological research to perform dark arts modifications on himself. Though the changes made his appearance hideous, they granted him great power. The physical modifications gave him the confidence to challenge Dumbledore in his 20s and 30s. These memories can be recorded in the Tower Spirit as data support, Matthew thought. He had already archived much Hogwarts world material in the Tower Spirit, common ingredients, recipes, and creature data. What he lacked was biological experimental data. After reaching second-level wizard status, one had to choose a path, specialize in spirit and soul through spiritual elevation, or pursue extreme physical power through bloodline purification and fusion. Both paths were mainstream in the wizarding world. With Slytherin's data, perhaps the bloodline strengthening path could be safer. Using the Tower Spirit and the Bio Workshop, Matthew could eliminate many risks and predict the outcomes of strengthening his bloodline, avoiding a grotesque transformation like Slytherin's or Voldemort's. Late August approached, and summer vacation was nearly over, but Harry felt anything but gloomy. They were going to the Quidditch World Cup tomorrow. Despite a few minor incidents, this had been her happiest summer. Past summers at the Dursleys had felt like years. This one had been spent mostly at the Weasleys. She had warmth, friends, and Sirius stopping by after work and on weekends for a visit and a meal. Fred, George, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Harry sat in a circle playing a new card game Matthew had invented, Wizard Cards. It was addictive and quickly caught on. Wizard cards had many card types, and what infuriated Harry most was a card called Witch Harley, a very powerful card. Since Matthew had given them pre-release decks as a favor, no one had trouble acquiring the meta Witch Harley cards. Later, once the game went public, the Witch Harley series would be rare. The game balance still needed tuning, so Matthew hadn't opened the complex multiplayer modes yet. Ron suggested a points tournament, a round robin where everyone plays twice, once going first and once second. The last place player would have to fulfill one request from the first place winner. The tournament had reached its final round. The standings: Ginny, 8 points. Hermione, 7 points. Ron, 7 points. Fred, 3 points. George, 2 points. Harry, 2 points. Hermione and George were finishing their match. Harry wore the most serious expression. Luck hadn't favored him today. His deck had been clunky, and his new deck hadn't shown its strength. He was tied with George. If George won... Hermione, use that brilliant brain of yours. Beating George shouldn't be a problem. Hermione didn't live up to his hopes. She seemed to have a poor hand, and ended her turn having set just 2 cards. My turn. George drew a card. Hermione flipped a card on the field. Dark Lord returns. On your turn, discard 1 card to summon a servant of the Dark Lord. Next turn, I can summon the Dark Lord directly. George, your time is running out. George looked at his draw and smiled mysteriously. Useless. A futile struggle, he mocked. The victory combo is complete. I sacrifice Harry Potter on the field to summon Witch Harley, he announced. Activate event card, Witch's Charm, Hermione cried. Your servant of the Dark Lord is mine now, George shot back. Activate event card, Taste of the Witch, George added. Sacrifice the servant of the Dark Lord, and Witch Harley evolves into Sorceress Harley. A dynamic image on the card showed Sorceress Harley riding a broom through the night in a gothic dress. The character cards in Wizard Cards had animated effects like a newspaper clipping coming alive. Hermione spread her hands. I lose. Her health was nearly gone, and she couldn't block Sorceress Harley's attack. Harry scratched his head. How could Hermione lose to George, who had only 2 points? With George's win, there would be no tiebreaker, and the standings were final. George crowed, Ron was right. Harley is just too good. George wasn't naturally a strong card player. Ron had fine-tuned the deck for him. Hermione smiled and announced, "First place is Ginny, last place is Harry. Ginny, what will your request be?" Today was the Quidditch World Cup, the thing Harry had been looking forward to all summer. And here she was, stuck in Ginny's room, having her makeup done and her hair braided by Ginny and Hermione. "Oh, right, because I lost to Ginny yesterday," she reminded herself. She'd been last in the tournament because she refused to play the meta Harley cards. Ginny had been first. Ginny's request? When they went to the Quidditch World Cup, Harry had to dress like the Harley in the cards. It was revenge. Harry had stewed over it, trying to psych herself up. If she became a girl for one day, maybe she could accept it. In the end, all that fretting was pointless. It wasn't permanent. She felt tricked and annoyed, but the bet was the bet. Everyone had happily helped Ginny set up the conditions, especially Ron, who enthusiastically tuned Ginny's deck. In truth, Ron was the most skilled wizard cards player. Under his adjustments, Ginny sailed to first place. Harry had stubbornly refused the Witch Harley meta and slid to the bottom. "Do I have to change clothes too?" Harry protested as Hermione held up the gothic dress. "A bet's a bet, Harry," Hermione said. Harry hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, I'll wear it." After changing, she stared at herself in the mirror, faintly stunned. Before Ginny and Hermione worked their magic, her look had been pure and cute. Now the reflection was more mature. She actually resembled the Sorceress Harley card. The girl in the mirror wore exquisite makeup, dark, dramatic eyes, bright lips, a cool, noble air. Long hair flowed over her shoulders like a waterfall. The gothic gown was as black as night, its hem swayed with her steps, hinting at mystery and elegance. She wore long black lace gloves, the delicate pattern running from wrist to shoulder, lending vintage charm and making her arms look slender. Where the skirt lifted, her legs showed a soft, elongated beauty. Ron stared unblinking as Harry came downstairs. She looked impossibly good. Dressed up, his friend had become even more beautiful and charming. He felt like their relationship was about to shift into something new. What a pity Harry couldn't recreate that polyjuice potion from that day, Ron thought regretfully. If he could brew it again, Harry might never change back. "Hey, stop staring at me," Harry said, flushed with shyness. She still wasn't used to the dress. It clung at the chest and waist, and the skirt made her feel oddly exposed beneath. Ginny linked her arm like a sister. "It's meant to be seen. Otherwise, all the effort Hermione and I put in would have been for nothing." Now that Harry was a girl, Ginny had an excuse to be bolder and more forward. "This is a limited edition Harley Potter," Hermione added, nodding. "Every look is precious." Soon the Weasley house filled with people. Matthew from nearby, Luna and her father. They were all heading to the Quidditch World Cup together. "Luna, long time no see. Why haven't I seen you around lately?" Harry greeted, trying to judge whether Luna would recognize her. Luna hadn't seen Harry like this before. "Hi, Harry. You've become so pretty." Luna turned her head and examined her in surprise. "I've been busy making postcards from my summer travels and taking care of an Akami baby, so I haven't had time to go out." Luna had been taking photos on her travels and turning some into postcards for friends. Matthew had given her an Akami hatchling from Newt Scamander to raise. That explained Luna's absence from Ginny's company and why she hadn't seen Harry's transformation. "You can recognize me even like this?" Harry tugged at the ends of her hair. She was wearing contact lenses now, and her lightning bolt scar was hidden by bangs. Luna shouldn't have been able to tell. Luna giggled and covered her mouth. "Matthew told me. You're the only girl here I haven't met before." Matthew laughed. "Harry, it seems you've adapted to the changes in your body. You're even wearing a dress." "I'm just a good sport about losing a bet," Harry said helplessly. "Ginny insisted I wear this." The door opened as Sirius and the rest of the Weasleys arrived, ready for the trip. "Children, time to head out," Arthur called. Sirius pretended to swoon. "Oh, I thought I'd walked into the Muggle cinema and seen a movie star." Molly hugged Harry, smiling. "So beautiful. I'm afraid Harry is going to charm quite a few young people." Harry rolled her eyes. "It's their misfortune to be charmed by me. Let's go. I can't wait to see the match." Outside, Lupin and Xenophilius Lovegood stood with hiking backpacks. A pile of bags lay at their feet. Harry moved to grab one, but Xenophilius stopped her. "The numbers are all allocated," he said with a smile. "The ladies don't need to carry backpacks." "But I'm a boy." Harry's voice dwindled into uncertainty. Ginny tugged her hand and led her away. "No, you're not." They headed to Stoatshed Hill, where the ministry had set up portkeys to the World Cup final. The portkeys had been placed near registered wizarding residences to make it easier for people to attend the match. Halfway there, they ran into Cedric Diggory and his father, also on their way. After pleasantries, they joined up. Mr. Diggory loved to boast about his son, endlessly praising Cedric's achievements while Cedric tried to change the subject. Sirius finally cut in. "To rank second in the year, Cedric is indeed excellent," he said, clapping Matthew on the shoulder. "However, the top student is right here." Mr. Diggory wanted to exchange compliments with Matthew, who had no interest in that sort of thing, and brushed it off. Family pride, Matthew thought, was often its own language. Arthur surveyed the group. He had plenty of accomplished children. At the hilltop, they found the portkey, a tattered old boot. "Children, put your hands on it," Arthur instructed. Everyone stood in a circle and touched the boot. Arthur activated the portkey. Space twisted, and they vanished instantly. When they reappeared, they stood in a vast open area. A tired-looking man checked his watch. 5 o'clock, from Stoatshed Hill, he called. Another official yawned and recorded the time. They were World Cup stewards, responsible for documenting portkey use. Their attempts to dress like muggles looked strange and out of place. One steward wore a kilt and a Native American-style cloak. Weasley was well known in the ministry. The steward in the kilt brightened up. "Good morning, Arthur." "Good morning, Gomez," Arthur replied, handing over the boot. "Diggory, you're in the second campsite. A black reserved site? Let me see. In the first campsite, the largest plot, the manager is Mr. Roberts." The steward told them where their camp was. After crossing a forest, they reached the campsite. The Diggorys said their goodbyes and headed on. Their pitch lay further in. In front of a stone cottage, a man stood with a dazed expression. Matthew saw at a glance that he'd been given a memory charm. "Hello, are you Mr. Roberts?" Matthew asked. "Yes, I'm Roberts. Reserved by Black, it's near the lake." Sirius produced some muggle money. "I've brought money." He held up a banknote. "How much is this?" Roberts blinked. "You're asking me?" "There doesn't seem to be anyone else here," Sirius said. "You don't recognize pounds?" Roberts asked. Sirius shrugged. "I'm illiterate." That was a line Matthew had taught him for dealing with muggles. Roberts patiently explained. "This is 50 pounds. If you need to pay the reservation fee, you'll need 8 more notes like this." Sirius counted out 8 identical banknotes and handed them over. Roberts nodded and recorded it in his ledger. "What a strange day," he muttered afterward. "So many people booking campsites, foreigners, weirdos, even an illiterate person. And many of them seem to know each other." Roberts added, puzzled. His concern deepened. He wondered if he should call the police. At that moment, a steward stepped out of the cottage and raised his wand. "Obliviate," he barked. Roberts's furrow smoothed, and he slipped back into his dazed state. Harry and Hermione's eyelids twitched. It was their first time seeing how bluntly the ministry enforced the statute of secrecy. The steward complained after casting the charm. "I'm exhausted. To keep Mr. Roberts from getting suspicious, I've cast memory charms so many times. See you later, Arthur." Once they were out of earshot, Matthew grumbled. "Can't the ministry assign this task to someone else? If the ministry is too busy, they could at least find some squibs to help." He'd always found the ministry's operations absurd, trying to maintain secrecy while involving muggles in wizarding gatherings. Arthur shrugged. "Someone suggested that, but Minister Scrimgeour isn't keen on squibs." The campsite's tents were a bizarre sight. Owners had tried hard to make them look like muggle tents, but, like the steward's outfits, they ended up looking awkward. The most conspicuous was a hot air balloon tent plastered with Quidditch star posters. Because they had many people, they'd reserved the largest plot, a good spot with forest to the left and a lake behind. "This place is great, Sirius. You booked a wonderful spot." Arthur praised. Sirius rubbed the back of his head. "I had my assistant book it." As everyone unpacked, Sirius waved his wand and the materials flew into place. The tent assembled itself. From the outside it looked ordinary, but inside an undetectable extension charm made it huge. Kitchen, bathroom, bedrooms. It had everything. With so many of them, Sirius had brought an enormous tent. Sirius, pitching by hand would give it more of a camping feel, Arthur teased. Is that so? I'll try it next time, Sirius said. They began preparing a midday picnic. Ginny and Harry were in charge of gathering firewood. Harry sent a bundle of twigs floating after her with her wand. Ginny did the same. Harry's eyes lit up when she spotted some bird eggs higher up the tree. She slipped off her shoes and socks and nimbly climbed. The dress didn't slow her at all. She used to climb trees like this before everything changed. Just as she reached for the eggs, a familiar voice called from below, and the eggs shot away. Oxio bird eggs! Harry looked and saw that Malfoy had summoned them. He'd assumed Ginny was with other Weasleys and hadn't seen who had climbed the tree. He tossed the eggs in his hand, smirking. You Weasley idiots, did you forget your people? Malfoy, we found those eggs first, Ginny snapped. They're in my hands, so they're mine. Want them? Beg me, he taunted, tilting his head. Ginny clenched her fists, furious. From above, a clear, pleasant voice called, Ginny, catch the eggs! A fragrant breeze drifted down. Malfoy caught only a glimpse of pale skin before something kicked him hard to the ground. Harry jumped down, and Ginny flicked her wand. Oxio bird eggs! The eggs flew into Ginny's hand. Malfoy tried to rise, but found a knee pinning his chest. Bastard! How dare you touch a noble Malfoy? Who are you? He demanded. He'd heard a voice just then, and realized it hadn't come from a boy. In his memory, the Weasleys had only one daughter. The person beating you up, Harry said, not wanting to give her name and be mocked. She hauled him up and landed a punch on his cheek. Ah, you dare hit my handsome face, Malfoy groaned, clutching his jaw. It was the first time a girl had hit him. He couldn't be laughed off. You are so dead. His bravado faltered. His unpunched cheek reddened. Now he saw the attacker's face clearly. Strands of hair brushed her cheek, framing exquisite features, vivid green eyes bright with life, well-shaped brows that matched her determined glance, fair skin, and vividly colored lips that gave her a cool elegance. Long black lace gloves complemented her Gothic-style gown, lending mystery and grace. Malfoy's face flushed a deep red. His heart raced like never before. Despite being hit, he found himself thinking she was beautiful. He dropped his gaze, embarrassed, and noticed she was barefoot, toes peeking from under her skirt. Her feet were pale and smooth. A ridiculous private thought flickered through his head. If he'd been kicked by those feet, it might not be the worst thing. He rubbed his cheek and glared up at her. 290, Malfoy's regret. Ginny, let's go. After slipping on his shoes and socks, Harry grabbed the firewood and led Ginny away from the spot. Malfoy clutched one side of his face and watched the graceful figure fade into the distance. He only came to himself once Harry had vanished from sight. Hiss! That really hurts! He pressed at his cheek and found it already swollen. Yet instead of anger, a dull regret filled him. Blast! I forgot to ask her name. He felt a sudden pang. He hadn't even thought to ask where the girl was from. That beautiful girl. What family was she from? Malfoy couldn't believe someone that elegant would be Muggle-born. Judging by her clothes, she didn't look like a Muggle at all. Why had he never seen her at school? Maybe she was a foreigner. With the World Cup drawing so many visitors, it wouldn't be strange for the Weasleys to know wizarding families from other countries. I hope I see her again. He pressed his face and limped toward the other side of the campsite. He needed to go back and tend the swelling. Back at the camp, his odd appearance was quickly noticed by Narcissa. Seeing her son's face puffed up, she was instantly alarmed. Draco, what happened to your face? Normally, he'd have complained and tattled on whoever had done it, but he thought better of it and lied. I just tripped in the forest. Honestly, you're nearly grown, and you still go tripping about like a child. Narcissa scolded, exasperated. On the other side, Harry and Ginny returned to their camp. Ginny tossed the bird eggs she'd collected into the bonfire. They'll be ready soon. A moment later, she picked up a stick, pulled the eggs from the fire, and peeled them. They were cooked perfectly. She'd had plenty of practice as a child climbing trees, stealing eggs, and gathering wild fruit with her brothers. The eggs were smaller than chicken eggs, but she split one in half. Just eat it. Thanks, Harry said as Ginny popped half the egg into his mouth. That idiot Malfoy was stunned by my punch. Harry told Ron, recounting his deed. He just stood there clutching his face and couldn't snap out of it for ages. Really? Damn it, it's Fred's fault for dragging me off to fetch water. If I'd known you'd run into Malfoy, I would have followed you no matter what, Ron said indignantly. He looked fiercely protective of Harry. Even in Ginny's thoughts, Harry only grew in stature. Even though Harry was a girl now, she was still brave. She hadn't hesitated to teach Malfoy a lesson when he insulted the Weasleys. Around noon, a guest arrived at the camp. "Oh, it's Mr. Bagman." Arthur recognized him and greeted him warmly, introducing him to everyone. Mr. Bagman is the head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports at the Ministry of Magic. Bagman laughed. "Ha, Arthur, no wonder you said you didn't need my tickets. This campsite is impossible to book." Arthur waved him off. That was Sirius. He managed the tickets. Bagman stepped forward to shake hands. The Wizarding Times was already popular across Europe, and many people knew Sirius was a director there. Bagman soon spotted Matthew among the group and went over to shake his hand enthusiastically. "Oh, Matthew, this must be our first time meeting." "Hello, Mr. Bagman," Matthew replied with a smile. "Matthew, you won the Hogwarts Quidditch Cup Best Player Award. You could easily join the England Quidditch team after graduation. I hope I'll get to see you play at the World Cup?" Matthew shook his head. "I'll have to disappoint you, Mr. Bagman. I don't plan to pursue that. He had too many other responsibilities to make the time investment Quidditch required." The World Cup was on a different scale from the House Cup. Quidditch wasn't a one-man game, and it demanded long, intense training. Bagman sighed with admiration. To have founded something like the Times publishing house at such an age, your future is limitless. It's no wonder you care less for the glory of Quidditch. Matthew laughed. "It's just a matter of priorities." After the pleasantries, Bagman got down to business. "Anyone want to place any bets?" He shook his robes and the clink of coins came from his pockets. He shared his thoughts on both teams, predicted how the match would go, and urged people to wager. Arthur decided to put his money on Ireland. "A good choice, Arthur. I'm optimistic about the Irish team," Bagman agreed, still egging people on. "Anyone else?" Sirius, not short of funds, smiled. "That Krum kid impresses me. I'll back Bulgaria." "Very good. With Victor Krum, Bulgaria has a real chance," Bagman said, then turned to Matthew. "Matthew, who do you think will win?" "The Irish team is stronger overall," Matthew said. "Victor Krum is currently the best seeker, but his teammates aren't as strong." For the sake of joining in, Matthew placed a bet on Ireland. The Weasley twins, seeing his choice, pooled their savings and bet on Ireland too. With pockets a little fatter, Bagman left the camp satisfied and moved on to the next group to encourage more betting. Evening came quickly. The atmosphere in the camp heated up. Peddlers moved through the crowds hawking goods and food from all over the wizarding world, and stalls sold merchandise for the teams. Ron kept glancing at a stall where a miniature Quidditch pitch was on display, a tiny field with 12 player dolls darting back and forth. Noticing Ron's longing, Harry bought the miniature pitch for him. He wanted Ron to feel spoiled for once, and teased gently, "Don't start expecting this every Christmas." Ron accepted the gift, an early Christmas treat happily. Then, from the direction of the stadium, dazzling lights erupted. "Kids, it's time! Time to go watch the match," Arthur said excitedly. The camp surged as everyone moved toward the stadium. Joy, excitement, and a contagious fanaticism spread through the crowd as they set off to see the World Cup. 291. Quidditch World Cup. Everyone followed the crowd and arrived in front of a vast stadium. "They say this place holds 100,000 spectators," Arthur announced enthusiastically. "The ministry's been working on it for a whole year." At the entrance, a witch checked tickets. She glanced at the passes Arthur and Sirius handed over. "First-class boxes, top level. Go straight up, it's at the very top." In the box, they found the Malfoys. Lucius gave a cold nod to a smiling Weasley, then brightened when he saw Matthew. "You didn't come by during the summer, did you? Your Aunt Narcissa missed you terribly," he said. Now that Matthew's Times publishing house was doing so well, Lucius's previous indifference had given way to something warmer. Matthew replied gently, "I've been quite busy over the summer." "Running a company like Times Publishing House, of course you were busy," Lucius said, pulling Draco close. "Draco, stop daydreaming. Go greet your cousin Matthew." Draco snapped out of it. He looked at Matthew and instinctively drew his neck in. He was, beneath it all, a little afraid of that cousin. "Cousin Matthew," he mumbled. Matthew smiled and gave a polite nod. He had noticed Draco zoning out. Draco had been staring at Harry. Matthew's expression sharpened with interest. Was the boy attracted to Harry, who had become a girl? He wondered briefly how Draco would react when he learned the truth. Once everyone had taken their seats, Draco couldn't stop sneaking looks at Harry. She was really here. And she was sitting next to Ron Weasley. Draco's eyes practically smoked. That blasted Ron. We'd seen him steal Harry in their first year, and now he was sitting with this girl? Perhaps they were related. He tried to convince himself. He looked away to regroup. Harry, chatting with her friends, suddenly frowned. She felt an uncomfortable gaze and glanced up to meet Draco's eyes. Harry raised an eyebrow, assuming Draco still bore a grudge for the punch she'd given him in the forest. She shot him a provocative look and then turned away. What Harry didn't see was Draco go bright red. His heart was pounding like a frightened rabbit. Narcissa noticed at once. "What's the matter? You look flushed." Draco blinked. "It's nothing. I'm just a bit warm. Maybe I'm wearing too much." More guests filtered into the box, leading figures from the British wizarding world. Arthur shook hands and exchanged pleasantries without stopping. After greeting Arthur, people inevitably drifted over to speak with Matthew. If Matthew had wanted, his pockets would have been stuffed full of visiting cards. The Minister of Magic, Scrimgeour, was the last to arrive, making a stately entrance. He scanned the top boxes, ignored the socializing, and took the center seat in the front row, both a box and a podium. Bagman hurried over. "Minister, we can begin." Minister Scrimgeour raised his wand to his throat and cast Sonorous. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 1994 Quidditch World Cup Final." He spoke briefly about the history of the Quidditch World Cup and expressed his honor at hosting the tournament in England, praising the ministry's dedication to the game. After a full 30 minutes of remarks, he concluded, "The 1994 Quidditch World Cup Final is officially begun." The cooled anticipation in the stadium ignited again. Thunderous cheers and applause rolled through the stands. Bagman cast Sonorous on himself and stepped forward to take over the commentary. "Please welcome the Bulgarian team's mascots." A wolf-like roar rose from the crowd. This was the Vila. 100 of them glided onto the pitch as music swelled, and they began an enchanting dance. In the stands, boys stared open-mouthed. Ron suddenly stood as if about to walk to the front rail. "Ron?" Harry asked, puzzled. The physical change meant Harry wasn't affected by the Vila. Hearing her clear, amused voice, Ron blinked and came back to himself. "Ah, I'm just tired of sitting," he muttered and sank down, relief flooding him. Vila were terrifying. He'd almost lost his composure in front of Harry. Matthew had been watching to see whether Harry would be affected. Even if only temporarily, Harry had truly become female in physiology and was immune to the Vila's charm. He looked away once the display ended. Bagman continued. "Next, the Irish team's mascots." Tiny leprechauns in red waistcoats zipped through the air above the stadium, tracing firework patterns. Finally, they formed a giant shamrock, and a golden rain of coins fell from it. Spectators scrambled to catch the falling gold with cheers all around. Then the players for both teams emerged. The arrival of Bulgaria's star seeker, Crumb, sent the atmosphere sky high. When the match began, both sides displayed extraordinary skill. Bagman called the action loudly and clearly. "The Irish chasers have taken the quaffle. Their coordination is impeccable. They've broken through the Bulgarian defense." 10 points for Ireland. The Irish kept the momentum, at one point dominating the scoreboard. Arthur slapped Matthew's hand in a happy high five and turned to Sirius. "Sirius, betting on Ireland seems to have been the right call." The score raced to 140-10, an almost one-sided running. Then Bagman yelled, "Crumb and Lynch are accelerating. The two seekers have picked up speed. Have they spotted the golden snitch? They're still speeding up? It doesn't look like a feint. Oh, I've got eyes on the snitch too." The golden snitch has appeared. The score is 140-10. If Crumb catches the snitch, Bulgaria could turn this around. The crowd held its breath as the two seekers dove and weaved, obstructing each other while closing on the snitch. They plunged nearly together, stretching their hands for the tiny gold ball. Lynch slammed into the pitch. Crumb shot back up, the golden snitch clenched in his hand. The scoreboard flashed 107 to 160. For a moment, the stadium was stunned. Then bagmen shouted, "Bulgarian seeker Crumb has caught the golden snitch. The match is over." But the Irish had just scored 3 more goals while they were chasing the snitch. The winners are Ireland. The match was over, but the celebrations were just beginning. Matthew and his group returned to the lakeside campsite to stay up all night. One cluster was drinking and shouting. Another had gathered to play a game of 21. Tonks arrived shortly after. Her auror shift at the match had just ended. The festive noise didn't die down until late. Only the occasional drunken shout cut through the night. Matthew noticed the commotion growing louder. Sirius lurched to his feet, unsteady from drink, but Arthur pressed him back into his seat. "You've had enough," Arthur said. "I'll go see what's going on." Arthur, having kept his wits about him, ran off and came back breathless. "There's trouble outside. Rioters everywhere. I need to find the head of the auror office." "Lupin, keep an eye on Sirius and take the children into the nearby woods," Arthur ordered. "I'm coming too." Tonks threw on her coat. The aurors who'd finished their shifts were bound to return to duty. She followed Arthur out of the campsite and immediately saw the chaos. Black-robed figures with masked faces storming from tent to tent, casting curses and setting things ablaze. People screamed and scattered. "You go find the head. I'll help here," Tonks told Arthur. She saw a fellow auror trading spells with one of the attackers. These rioters weren't using the unforgivable curses, just brutal, indiscriminate hexes, so for a moment Tonks felt some relief. "Be careful," Arthur told her. More black-robed attackers swarmed the exchange. The blonde witch dueling them was outnumbered and forced to shelter behind a crate. Tonks dove in, blasting a rioter with stupefy and rolling to avoid incoming spells. She found cover and shouted to her colleague behind the crate, "Gwen, are you all right?" "Tonks, I'm fine," Gwen called back. "Hold on, reinforcements will be here soon." Tonks replied, but then she saw a baby lying alone on the path. Its parents lay stunned by a nearby curse, unmoving. The rioters hadn't harmed the child, but leaving it there was asking for tragedy. "Gwen, cover me," Tonks shouted. Gwen answered, and Tonks darted out, scooped up the crying infant, and rolled across the ground to dodge spells. With the child safe in her arms, she didn't go back to her original position. Instead, she and Gwen slipped through the tents, weaving past flames and fallen gear until they lost their pursuers. "Phew, we finally shook them," Gwen said, panting. Tonks touched her forehead. It came away wet with blood where she'd banged it while dodging. "I'm all right," she said, though a tremor lingered. She spotted another black-robed figure standing a short distance away. "Do you see them?" "Yeah," Gwen replied. "They haven't noticed us yet. They're alone. No point in taking chances." The rioting drew in more people by the minute. Drunkards, angry fans looking to vent, thrill-seekers who lived for chaos. They cast spells at anything that moved, destroying tents and even levitating muggles as if they were kites. Then a thunderous boom split the night. An enormous, emerald-green skull bloomed in the clouds, a great serpent lolling from its mouth. "It's the Dark Mark," someone screamed. "You know who is back," terror rippled through the campsite. Tonks froze. She had watched the black-robed figure a moment before. The Dark Mark had been conjured by that person. The rioter turned, and a black mist clung around their face. The mist gave anyone who looked at it a cold, hollow feeling. They breezed a mocking tone as they saw Tonks clutching the baby. "Master, I've been discovered by 2 little cuties," the rioter cooed, peering at them. "Oh, make that 3. High in a tree, a small transfiguration sparrow that had been watching everything dissolved into a scatter of bubbles and vanished. Farther away, in the small stand of trees where Matthew and the others had retreated, he felt the disturbance. His sparrow had disappeared. He'd sent that transfiguration bird with Dolores Umbridge earlier. The Slytherin Horcrux he'd hidden had been placed on her to monitor what she did. Adult minds resist the pull of a Horcrux, but the fragment had worked on Umbridge through greed and vanity, slowly unhinging her until the Horcrux took full control last week. Each Horcrux contained different knowledge depending on when it had been made. The Slytherin fragment knew more than some of the older pieces. That fragment had learned of the World Cup through Umbridge and had come to see if it could find Harry Potter. Legend said Harry loved Quidditch and might be here. Finding no Potter at the stadium, the Horcrux decided to make trouble anyway. Master, things are getting chaotic outside. Umbridge whimpered in her own voice. The Horcrux inside her answered directly in her mind, with a harsh male tone. I noticed. They're nothing but rabble. The Horcrux recognized faces underneath some of the hoods. These were servants of Voldemort who'd not shown vigor during the Dark Lord's downfall. Annoyed at their lethargy, the fragment took full control of Umbridge and made her draw her wand. A cruel smile spread over her face. In a voice that was not entirely hers, she hissed, It's time for a reminder. The wand shot a streak of green light into the clouds. The light detonated, and the dark mark, an enormous emerald skull with a serpent, blazed above the campsite. The Horcrux watched the panic with a satisfied, pitiless gaze. Since you're so relaxed, why don't you take a little holiday in Azkaban? The voice whispered in Umbridge's head. Then the Horcrux found the two Aurors it despised, Tonks among them, and the voice turned vicious. Don't reveal yourself. Kill them. As you command, my master, Umbridge managed, the smile folding into cruelty. Avada Kedavra! A streak of deadly green leapt at Tonks. She had no time to dodge. In that instant, an invisible force seized her and yanked her bodily out of the curse's path, lifting her high and away. The killing curse slammed harmlessly into empty air. Tonks trembled in the grip of the unseen power as the ground where she'd stood seared scorched. Umbridge hissed in fury. The voice in her mind snapped, Idiot! The enemy is above you. Run! Startled, Umbridge looked up. A figure hovered beneath the dark mark, a presence in the sky no one had expected. You are no match for him. What are you waiting for? The voice commanded. Umbridge apparated away before anyone could stop her. Matthew remained in the air, calm. He had let Umbridge escape on purpose. There was a reason he'd put a Horcrux on her, to see if the fragment, once it had control, would seek out other pieces. He didn't know how many Horcruxes Voldemort had hidden, and he wanted to watch what the fragment would do. His Transfiguration Sparrow had been monitoring Umbridge. When it disappeared, it signaled Tonks had encountered the woman. That was why Matthew had come. Tonks recognized him by his clothes and shouted into the night, Matthew, did you save me? Matthew smiled and lowered her gently to the ground with the invisible hand. The blonde witch standing with Gwen squinted up into the darkness and asked, Is that your cousin up there? Tonks nodded, still shaken. Yes. You're lucky to have him save you from a killing curse like that, the witch breathed. Panic erupted among the crowd at the sight of the figure under the dark mark. Look, someone's in the sky, someone cried. That's you-know-who. Fear spread like wildfire. The mob snapped from drunken brawlers into blind terror. People shoved and ran. A drunk collided with the person in front of him and both went down. A stampede began. Someone point-blank tried to hit Matthew with a spell, hurling their wand toward him. Matthew's expression darkened. He flicked his own wand once, and the air seemed to thicken. Everyone's movements slowed, as if time itself had become viscous. Matthew condensed the air into water and used the currents to steer the stampede apart. The water washed over would-be attackers and stripped their wands from their hands. Dozens of wand shafts flew out of the water and fell to the invisible hand. When the water dispersed, the crowd found their clothes stiffened and tight around them. The moisture Matthew had created had frozen hard against their garments. He hardened the water so that it bound them in place. Dozens lay immobilized on the ground, separated by the currents so they hadn't been trampled into one another. At that moment, the head of the Auror office burst onto the scene with a dozen Aurors, Arthur close behind. They arrived to find the rioters subdued under Matthew's control. The head swallowed hard. Is that you-know-who? Has he returned? He asked Arthur. Arthur peered up at the figure in the sky. From the distance, he could still make out the clothing. Probably not, he said shakily. He looks, no, it can't be. Then recognition flashed through him. Is that Matthew? He said, stunned. He could not see the face clearly, but he knew the silhouette and the coat. After Matthew had scattered the rioters, the Auror office moved in to clean up. The Aurors corralled the crowd. There were so many participants that, in the end, most would be dealt with leniently, a stiff fine, and that would be the end of it. When Matthew landed, Gadwin Robards, head of the Auror office, hurried forward to shake his hand. Robards already knew of Matthew from the wizarding newspaper. He had assumed the column's tales were exaggerations to sell papers, and that this young Black was just a clever businessman. He had not expected Matthew Black actually to possess the powers described. Most of the rioters had been drunk and were no match for an Auror one-on-one, but the sheer numbers made the situation dangerous. Yet Matthew had resolved it with effortless speed. "He hasn't even graduated, and already has such strength," Robards murmured, watching Matthew's young face. For a moment, some darker image flickered through his mind, you know who, but he kept it to himself and put on a friendly smile. "Mr. Black, on behalf of the Auror office, thank you for your courage." Matthew waved it off. It was just convenient timing. Robards noticed Nymphadora Tonks approaching with a baby in her arms and realized Tonks's mother was a Black. He wondered what the family connection was, and as a courtesy said to Tonks, "Arthur told me you were brave to step in before we did." He meant to reward her bravery, though the real reason he wanted to be friendly was Matthew. The young man's capabilities made him worth cultivating. A friendly gesture now might avoid making an enemy later. He kept that thought from the others and offered a few more polite words to Tonks before turning back to Matthew. "Mr. Black, thank you again. There are many foreign guests at the campsite. This incident has caused quite a stir. We'll hold a press conference. The Auror office will present you with a Medal of Valor at that time, and a portion of the fines collected will be set aside as a reward." Matthew nodded. "I'll attend." He wouldn't refuse an opportunity to build reputation. With that, Robards took his leave. The Aurors had more to do, and Arthur Weasley, who had been at the scene, received a summons from Minister Scrimgeour and hurried back to work. Matthew returned to the lakeside campsite. Lupin had been watching the aftermath since he saw the dark mark, and now that things had calmed, he led the others back. "Where are Tonks and Arthur? Are they all right?" he asked. "They're fine, but they've been called back to work," Matthew said. "Dad has to work overtime too? Isn't he at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office?" Ron asked, surprised. "Who knows? Maybe it involved Muggles. A family of Mr. Robards was dragged out and paraded by the rioters." Matthew shrugged. "They should be locked up in Azkaban," Sirius growled, having sobered up from the tea and feeling clearer. "They probably won't," Matthew said. "I spoke with head of the Auror office. They'll be fined." The Ministry couldn't imprison dozens of people in Azkaban over a drunken riot. "I underestimated you," Lupin said quietly. "If I'd known you could handle that many people, we wouldn't have had to hide in the woods." Matthew had let them take shelter, partly to put their minds at ease. After the incident, everyone's mood was gone. They packed up and headed home. At the Ministry, Scrimgeour and Robards argued about the fines. "A portion of the fines for a reward? Robards, the Ministry's budget is stretched thin," the minister said. "Those fines should go to the Ministry." Robards bristled. "This was an Auror office matter. The fines should remain with our office." To prepare for the World Cup and the Triwizard Tournament, the Department of Magical Games and Sports has expanded. The Ministry has put in a lot of resources. We need to replenish funds. Scrimgeour had already split the Auror office's responsibilities, creating a new office for the management of security under the minister's direct control, leaving the Auror office with far fewer staff. When the call went out, only a dozen Aurors could be mustered. Robards had planned to use fines to expand his team before the Triwizard Tournament. Now that money would be taken. The minister insisted the whole ministry was busy and the fines should help keep it functioning. Robards left with no leverage. Later, sitting in his office, he realized he'd already promised Matthew a reward. Going back on his word would be politically foolish. He decided to allocate ministry funds to honor Matthew as promised, even if he couldn't keep the fines. The planned expansion of the Auror office, however, would have to be postponed. As for the tournament's security, wasn't it at Hogwarts? Dumbledore was there. What could go wrong? 2 days later, the Auror office held a press conference to explain the riot. The participants were officially classified as drunk and disorderly. Those who paid their fines were allowed to go home. Robards stood at the podium before a press room full of reporters and ministry officials. "This was an incident of drunken mischief," he said. The media should not sensationalize it. The Auror office did its best despite being understaffed. The man who cast the dark mark has been arrested. He was once a Death Eater. Given his drunken state, we will not send him to Azkaban, but he will face the maximum fine. You know who has not returned. This was a misunderstanding. The figure seen in the air was Mr. Black, who intervened and prevented the situation from getting worse. We have decided to award Mr. Black the Medal of Valor and a reward of 1,000 galleons. Reporters swarmed around Matthew afterward, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Black, is Robard's account true? Did you subdue so many people? How did you manage to handle so many at once? When you flew to the Dark Mark, were you imitating you-know-who? When you stepped in, did you think the ministry was incompetent? Matthew smiled. Don't rush. Pick 3 questions, and I'll answer them. The crowd fell silent, pushed back by an invisible force. Matthew pointed to a blonde, wavy-haired reporter from the Wizarding newspaper. She beamed. Mr. Black, what did you use? I didn't see any wand movements. Matthew answered, This is runic magic, what some call the invisible hand. Runic magic can be cast wandlessly and silently. I've written a paper about runic magic for the Wizarding newspaper's academic column. He nodded at a young man from a collaborating paper. The reporter asked, Mr. Black, with the Triwizard tournament returning and schools from outside Europe invited, are you confident of becoming Hogwarts champion and doing well? Matthew smiled. Let nature take its course. The Goblet of Fire chooses the champion, but I'm confident in my abilities. If I'm chosen, I will represent Hogwarts and aim to win. The reporter grinned. We hope the champion will be you. We're all Hogwarts alumni here. Matthew turned to the next person. Miss Skeeter? Rita Skeeter, already famous for her columns, leaned forward, fawning. Mr. Black, I saw you suppress the rioters. Was the power you used then also runic magic? I actually used transfiguration, Matthew said. There must be footage from the scene. Any transfiguration expert watching would see that I used an advanced transfiguration technique, air transfiguration. Rita's eyes lit up. I didn't expect you to be a transfiguration master. May I ask, how did you achieve so much at such a young age? Both your transfiguration and runic skills seem beyond the ordinary. My grandfather was a runic scholar, Matthew said. He introduced me to runes early, which gave me a solid foundation for runic magic. As for transfiguration, perhaps I'm naturally suited to it. Everyone has strengths. I happen to be good at transfiguration, so I put more effort into it. Don't waste your energy trying to excel in everything, he grinned. For example, I'm hopeless at alchemy. Fortunately, it isn't central to our exams, otherwise I might not stay top of the class. Rita nodded, delighted. Talent and hard work, thank you. The next day, every paper ran the story. All of Europe's well-known wizarding papers had offices in the Wizarding newspaper, and the interview spread fast. The Daily Prophet's headline read, Matthew Black, Dumbledore's perfect successor. Wizarding Newsweekly ran, Matthew Black, I will represent Hogwarts and win the goblet. The Wizarding Times went with, Matthew Black, have you seen the common room at 4 in the morning? 294. Bloodline Secret Technique. Matthew arrived at Changson Potions in the 6th Ring Wizard City to sell his usual batch. Mr. Gelman, here's the payment for this shipment, the blonde elf said, handing over the coins and then slipping several rolls of parchment across the counter. By the way, I found a few first-tier bloodline secret techniques you asked me to keep an eye out for. After working together for some time, Matthew and the blonde elf had grown familiar. He had asked her to watch the market for rare first-tier bloodline secret techniques. Once a wizard reached 2nd level, they had to choose a path. With a tower spirit that had powerful computation and a well-equipped biological lab, Matthew's best route was bloodline purification and fusion. Bloodline secret techniques were the methods for fusing bloodline power, and they were scarce, even low-tier ones. It wasn't strictly necessary to be a 2nd-level wizard to fuse a bloodline. It could be attempted earlier. But the risks were considerable. Before the 2nd-level breakthrough, consciousness and soul lacked the protection of a true 2nd-level safeguard, and physical changes could irreversibly damage the soul and the vital core. Many apprentices or 1st-level wizards who had tried bloodline fusion found it harder to reach 2nd level afterward. Matthew inspected the 4 scrolls the elf had laid out. crocodile billed crow, mountain wolf, silver-winged snake, and ground lizard bloodline secret techniques. "What's the price on these?" he asked with a smile. The blonde elf leaned on the counter, twirling a lock of hair. "They're not worth much. Consider them a gift." Matthew raised an eyebrow in surprise. First-tier techniques weren't expensive, but 4 of them would still normally cost several hundred to 1,000 coins. Her generosity suggested she saw value in keeping him as an ally. Third-tier pharmacists were rare in the 6th ring. "That's embarrassing. I didn't spend anything. They came from my family's library," she said casually. "Mr. Gelman's already a 2nd-level wizard, right? First-tier techniques won't do much for you. The physical benefit is negligible at your level." "Thanks, Miss Philly," Matthew said with a wry smile. "I'll take them for reference." In truth, he wanted to bring them back to his tower spirit and the bio workshop. Some bloodline secret techniques simply didn't utilize the raw bloodline potential efficiently. With optimization, their fusion rates could be raised, and a technique's effective grade might be upgraded. "The Seer Manor is holding a high-level auction tomorrow," the blonde elf added after a moment. "You can sometimes see 2nd-tier or even 3rd-tier bloodline secrets there." "Is it open to anyone?" Matthew asked. "It's by invitation only. Newcomers need a member to introduce them, and you must be a formal wizard or above to participate," she explained. "I'm a member, but I can't go tomorrow. I'm busy. If you want, I'll try to take you next month." "Thank you, Miss Feely. I'll look forward to it." Matthew smiled and left. Next, he went to a shop that recharged magic stones. Magic stones in the wizarding world were alchemical creations that stored power and could be recycled. Buying a new stone cost 1,000 coins, but recharging a depleted one only cost a few dozen. Matthew's tower consumed a great deal of power. The tower's systems could be charged directly with stones. He'd tried learning the recharging process himself, but it took too much time, so he paid to have it done. The shop owner was a tall, portly wizard who greeted him warmly. "Welcome back, Mr. Gelman. Your stones are ready." He handed Matthew 2,000 recharged magic stones from the back. After paying the fee, Matthew left with them, more than half his net worth. Long-term maintenance of the tower, reclaiming the bio workshop, and upgrading the eyeless basilisk had all cost heavily. Selling potions from the Hogwarts world in this world was extremely profitable. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to afford even 1,000 stones. When he was in a quiet spot outside the city, Matthew returned to the tower by thought and handed the 4 scrolls to the tower spirit for analysis. 0. Analyze and try to optimize these bloodline secret techniques to fit my constitution. Even identical techniques affected individuals differently. With the bio workshop, the tower spirit could simulate the technique's interaction with Matthew's blood and estimate fusion rates. After a moment, the spirit replied in its even voice. Ground lizard bloodline secret technique fusion rate, 61.1%. Estimated optimization increase, 0.6 to 1.1%. Mountain wolf fusion rate, 66.2%. Estimated optimization increase, 0.9 to 1.7%. Crocodile billed crow fusion rate, 18.1%. Estimated optimization increase, 9.2 to 16.6%. Silver-winged snake fusion rate, 12.5%. Estimated optimization increase, 52.9, 62 points percent. Proceed with optimization? The tower spirit's analysis was revealing. A first-tier technique wasn't simply tied to the creature's strength. It was defined by its fusion rate with the user. Generally, a fusion rate over 60% made the technique perform at its rated tier. The silver-winged snake itself was a 2nd-tier magical creature, but the technique Matthew had only showed a 12.5% fusion rate, so its current effect was only 1st tier. The spirit could, however, raise its fusion rate above 60%, effectively upgrading it to a 2nd-tier technique. The crocodile billed crow technique, despite the creature's 2nd-tier power, could not be optimized beyond 60% and would remain 1st tier. The ground lizard and mountain wolf were creatures of 1st-tier strength and not worth further optimization. Optimize the silver-winged snake technique, Matthew decided. Estimated time required, 1 hour. The tower spirit answered. While the tower spirit worked, Matthew returned to the city to buy materials for the silver-winged snake technique. The creature and its components should be available through the Court Wizard Headquarters Trading Hall. To enter, he would need to use Alsha's identity again. He confirmed no one was nearby, shifted his form into Alsha's appearance, and vanished in a ripple of space. In Alsha's guise, he arrived at the house by the mine where Alsha's long-term cover task kept her away from the capital, part of the pretense he used because Alsha had a delicate relationship with Her Highness Erin. A letter lay on the desk in the study. When Matthew picked it up, an eye opened on the envelope, scanned him, and closed. The envelope then unfolded to reveal the contents. A new batch of secret medicine will arrive at the royal capital in 6 days. Go to the outskirts of the city before 10 o'clock at night to receive it. Secret medicine, Matthew murmured. Someone in the Moon Candle Society was contacting Alsha. The secret medicine mentioned was the life-extending compound used for important figures. Perhaps, he thought, he could use the opportunity to promote the special elixir he'd made from a philosopher's stone. He decided it was worth a try. Gelman's identity was already established, and selling his usual wares brought steady income. If promoting the elixir under Alsha's persona backfired, losing that identity wouldn't be catastrophic. The note was 3 days old. Bearing Alsha's appearance, Matthew went to the court wizard headquarters. The trading hall on the second floor was where he needed to be. The petite, round-faced witch at the counter recognized him immediately. "Lady Alsha, would you like to exchange for something?" "Yes. Give me an item list," Matthew replied. She handed over a thin catalog. Matthew found a secluded bench to study it. He located the silver-winged snake entry and continued scanning for any first-tier bloodline secret techniques. He found 6 first-tier techniques listed. 4 of them were exactly the ones Miss Feely had given him. Without his Alsha-level discount, those 4 would have cost over 1,000 coins each. Thanks to Miss Feely, she said she found them in her family's library. Her family must be well connected, he thought. Satisfied, he handed the list back. "Will you be picking up or want home delivery?" the witch asked. "I'll pick them up now," he said. "Delivery will be here shortly," she answered. As Matthew waited, a blonde figure in a pale yellow dress approached. "Good afternoon, Princess Erin," he said with a smile. The girl's face brightened, then tightened. "Sister Alsha, you forgot me again. You haven't come to see me in so long." He'd expected Erin to find him. She seemed to have informants within the headquarters and had tracked Alsha's comings and goings before. Matthew supposed her attachment to Alsha stemmed from a lack of maternal warmth. Alsha's mature charm had quickly won Erin's loyalty. "I've been busy with a long-term assignment," Matthew said. "But if you like, let's spend the afternoon together once I pick up my things." Erin linked her arm through his. "What did Sister Alsha buy?" "Some materials for bloodline secret techniques," he said. "You know my natural wizard aptitude is poor. Becoming a formal wizard was hard enough. Second level is out of reach. I'm going to try the path of bloodline fusion to get stronger." Erin's eyes lit up. "I'll take you to the auction tomorrow. They sell all kinds of things there. There'll be bloodline secrets for sure." Just as Matthew had hoped, Erin could take someone to the Seer Manor auction. "Then let's go see it tomorrow," he agreed. 295, Enhancement of Bloodline Secret Techniques Wizard Tower. After saying goodbye to Erin, Matthew returned to the Wizard Tower. The Tower Spirit had already finished optimizing the Bloodline Secret art. The Tower Spirit reported, "Optimization of the Silver-Winged Snake Bloodline Secret art successful. The fusion level between the Silver-Winged Snake Bloodline Secret art and the Master has increased to 70.1%. Matthew was very satisfied. The fusion level had jumped from 12.5% to 70.1%. That level of fusion was enough to manifest the effects of the silver-winged snake bloodline and already met the standard of a second-tier bloodline secret art. The fusion level was an analysis the Tower Spirit produced based on Matthew's blood, something most wizards practicing bloodline secret arts didn't have the luxury to know in advance. Most only discovered their compatibility after they had already begun practicing. The road for a bloodline wizard was brutal. Several unlucky fusions with incompatible bloodlines could stall one's advancement. That was one key reason third-level wizards were so rare. Only a few old factions had ways to test compatibility ahead of time, and even their methods could only give rough estimates. The Tower Spirit and the Bio Workshop, however, could calculate an exact fusion level, so Matthew had already won at the starting line. 0. Test my physical data. Use an adult human as the baseline. He wanted a record of his physical condition before practicing the bloodline secret art so he could compare later. Detailed testing must be conducted in the bioworkshop laboratory, the tower spirit replied. Matthew went to the bioworkshop and followed Zero's instructions. After a short while, Zero produced the results and a translucent light screen appeared before him. Strength 1.8, Constitution 2.7, Agility 8.4, Perception 9.2. Strength represented physical power, muscle strength, and muscle toughness. Constitution covered robustness, immunity, resistance, endurance, and self-healing. Agility indicated balance, coordination, and neural reaction speed. Perception measured sensory ability and range. The numbers perfectly illustrated a glass cannon wizard. Even as a second-level wizard, Matthew's body was not much stronger than an ordinary person. His agility and perception far outstripped strength and constitution. Perception especially, at an astonishing 19.2. He had been born with an exceptional perceptive talent. His ascensions to first and second level had only amplified it. According to the Tower Spirit's rule of thumb, every 1 point of perception equaled roughly a 100-meter perception radius. Matthew's current perception range neared 2 kilometers, about double what an ordinary second-level wizard would have. 0. Extract the silver-winged snake bloodline power. He produced silver-winged snakes and other materials he had purchased at the court wizard headquarters. He had bought 3 snakes because bloodline secret arts usually couldn't be completed in a single go. The practice only truly finished when the bloodline power condensed into a 21. The silver-winged snakes he brought were alive but comatose from prior processing. Their skin shone pure silver, and 4 pairs of fleshy silver wings sprouted at the 7-inch mark. They were non-venomous, their bodies were solid muscle and radiated power. Each snake stretched about 3 meters long. The 15 took the materials, and the bioworkshop began operating. Half an hour later, the 15 handed Matthew 5 silver, 5 17s, extracted from 3 silver-winged snakes. That should be enough. Matthew drank one of the 37s immediately. A thick, fishy taste filled his mouth, then an intense burning followed, like drinking concentrated chili oil. His brow tightened, as if someone had hit a pause on his mind. The spiciness flooded his head, then spread like an infection from his mouth and stomach through his whole body. Every part ached with a harsh, stimulating pain. Bloodshot veins bulged under his skin. The change came quickly and then subsided just as fast. Minutes later, he returned to normal. "Hiss, this spang is really something," he murmured. It was the spiciest thing he'd ever tasted in both his lives. When the discomfort faded, he tested himself. At the surface, there was little difference. His muscles felt slightly firmer and his movements a bit lighter. 0. Check the changes in my body. 0 displayed the new data. Strength 2.1, Constitution 2.9, Agility 8.5, Perception 19 point. Because his strength had the most room to improve, it rose the most, by 0.3. Constitution rose by 0.2, and Agility by 0.1. The better the base attribute, the less it improves, Matthew thought. Strength had indeed gained a lot. Even without 39, he suspected he could beat most Muggle combat athletes now. Over the next 2 to 3 days, as his body fully digested the 17, further small improvements would occur. A second-tier bloodline secret art usually required several uses to condense A21. First-tier arts often needed only 1 or 2 doses. Higher-tier bloodlines required more. Regardless of tier, the first use always produced the strongest effect. Subsequent uses were less potent. 0. How many more times do I need to condense the silver-winged snake 21? Taking the 17 2 more times will allow you to condense the silver-winged snake 21, the tower spirit replied. Matthew returned to a quiet room and practiced the meditation method. Miss Feely had advised that meditating after drinking the vine could speed the body's absorption and fusion of the bloodline power. The next day, he was pleasantly surprised. What would have taken 2 or 3 days had finished in 1, thanks to the meditation and because it was his first time using a bloodline secret art. He'd learned from casual conversations with Miss Feely that after multiple 21s were condensed, the body would digest new bloodline power more slowly. 0. Check the changes in my body. The screen reappeared. Strength 2.3, Constitution 3.0, Agility 8.5, Perception 0.2. After digesting the bloodline power, Strength rose another 0.2 and Constitution by 0.1. Agility stayed the same. In total, this first bottle of Silver-Winged Snake 17 had increased Matthew's strength by 0.5, Constitution by 0.3, and Agility by 0.1. I can still take the Silver-Winged Snake 17 twice more, but the gains will be smaller. My body still isn't strong enough. If I obtained a third-tier bloodline secret art, I couldn't withstand that power yet. I hope tonight's auction yields a few more second-tier bloodline secret arts, he thought. Third-tier bloodline secret arts were crucial for bloodline wizards aiming to reach third level. Major factions guarded them tightly and rarely sold them. Matthew's realistic hope was to find several second-tier arts. Those could potentially be optimized into third-tier later. He drank another bottle of 17. This time the sensation was milder. Minutes later, the discomfort faded. 0. Check the changes in my body. Strength 2.5, Constitution 3.1, Agility 8.5, Perception 19.2. As expected, the effect was weaker. Strength plus 0.2, Constitution 1, Agility unchanged at least to the panel's precision. After adjusting to the changes, Matthew shifted into Alsha's appearance and returned to the mine house outside Sixth Ring Wizard City. Tonight, he would attend the auction at Seer Manor and might encounter some of Alsha's acquaintances. He had to review Alsha's memories to avoid mistakes. Alsha was still kept in the one, which Matthew left in the wizarding world because he traveled between worlds often. In his study, he pulled a book from the third row on the left. Opening it revealed a hollowed interior. He set the book on the floor and slipped into the space, an expansion created by the undetectable extension charm. Alsha lay on the table in the center. Long confinement had left her complexion pallid, her face almost bloodless like a vampire's. Matthew poured a potion into her mouth to wake her. The long sleep made her sluggish. She turned her head dully, and when she saw him, a flicker of terror flashed through her gaze. Matthew's eyes glowed faintly blue as he sifted through her memories. Her expression dulled again. He poured another potion and let her sleep on. Alsha was actually from the Academy faction? Matthew allowed himself a wry smile. The Academy faction centered on the Northland United Wizard Academy. After the previous two kings implemented 39 craft reforms and integrated 39 crafts into production, productivity exploded and the Blizzard Kingdom's population surged. More commoners became wizards, and the Northland United Wizard Academy grew powerful and ambitious, seeking power and resources to rival the noble factions. Curiously, the leader of this commoner-based academy faction was a noble, the principal of the Wizard Academy. The principal was also a member of Parliament, and her influence in the Blizzard Kingdom ranked only behind Princess Erin's father, Chairman Shear. Alsha had been a pawn trained by the principal to cultivate ties with the noble factions and fleece them. Approaching Princess Erin had been part of that plan. She had extracted considerable wealth from Erin. The principal, thinking Alsha had overstepped, sent her to Whitestone Town to cool off. What the principal didn't know was that Alsha had betrayed her. After contact with the Moon Candle Society and aided by the secret medicine, 34, and her social skills, Alsha maneuvered among the noble circles, secured substantial gains, and even worked her way into the formal wizard realm through resources. She was shrewd. Unable to cut ties with nobles, she paid lip service to her teacher while secretly disobeying. The Moon Candle Society had already spread its influence throughout the 1910s and won support from many longtime figures. It wasn't something the newly risen Academy faction could easily oppose. So Alsha planned to stay away from her teacher's notice until she became a formal wizard. She hadn't expected to fall in a remote, small town without a single formal wizard. None of this changed Matthew's immediate plans. His priority was to stay close to Erin. He checked the time. Evening. It was time for the auction at Seer Manor. He took a carriage to Erin's residence, a house much more luxurious than Alsha's and distinct from Seer Manor. It belonged solely to Erin. The guard saluted on sight. Lord Alsha. Matthew nodded and entered. Erin had allowed Alsha to come and go freely. In the living room, a servant approached and whispered, Lord Alsha, Princess Erin is changing. She asked you to go directly to the dressing room. Matthew raised an eyebrow. If he hadn't reviewed Alsha's memories before coming, he wouldn't have known the way. 296. Auction Observations. When Matthew arrived at the dressing room, Erin was seated at the vanity while maids styled her hair and fixed her headpieces. She wore a vibrant red gown, the color as hot and bright as the midsummer sun at noon, absolutely dazzling. It looked very expensive. Matthew could tell the dress employed complex marry, 34 craftsmanship. Along the hem, fiery light condensed into rosebuds that bloomed and vanished in a continuous cycle. Princess Erin, Matthew said. Erin glanced at the person behind her in the mirror. Sister Alsha is here, she said. Why are you still in 32 robes? Matthew was taken aback. He was wearing wine-red 32 robes, the uniform of a court wizard, the administrative color. Is there something wrong with 32 robes? He asked. The auction tonight is held as a banquet. You need to change, Erin explained. Then do I have to go back and change? Matthew frowned. He began to consider slipping away to handle it with transfiguration. No trouble at all. I've prepared something for Sister Alsha as well. Erin signaled to her maid to fetch the items. When the maid brought the dress out, Matthew realized he'd been set up. No matter what he wore, it would be judged inappropriate. He had little choice but to accept Erin's offering. Fortunately, since he was disguised as Alsha, as long as his face remained hidden, it didn't matter much. With the maid's help, he changed. This really suits Sister Alsha. My taste is impeccable. The blue goes perfectly with my red, Erin admired. The dress Erin had commissioned for Alsha was a deep blue gown that also used intricate 34 techniques. Shimmering threads were woven into the hem so that under the lights, they burst into tiny points like stars glittering across a night sky. When the hem swayed, it looked like a flowing river of stars. The stockings beneath were a deeper shade, like the dark beyond the galaxy, and the pure white long gloves seemed to glow with the river's radiance. The three colors layered together harmoniously. Matthew felt as if he wore not fabric but 11s and 34 stones. Such custom formal wear was a high-end luxury even in the wizarding world, beautiful and outrageously expensive. This outfit could probably buy a third-tier bloodline secret art, Matthew thought, sighing inwardly. After they changed, the two took a carriage to Sear Manor. In the carriage, Erin rifled through her handbag and produced a sheet of paper. I got the auction list this morning. Tonight's auction does include a second-tier bloodline secret art, she said. Matthew brightened. He took the list, a dazzling array of items, neatly categorized. He quickly found the column for meditation methods and secret arts. 2 second-tier bloodline secret arts were listed, the black-robed demon and the red sand giant scorpion. Seeing the 15s corresponding to the bloodline arts made him even more excited. Adult black-robed demons and red sand giant scorpions were both third-tier 15s. That meant these arts were rated only as second-tier because their fusion levels were low. Through the bio workshop at the Wizard Tower, Matthew might optimize them to third tier. I hope they can be optimized, he thought, smiling. Looks like there will be a harvest tonight. Erin, however, shook her head. I wouldn't recommend Sister Alsha buy those two. Why not? Matthew asked. She gave 2 reasons. First, both the black-robed demon and the red sand giant scorpion are third tier 15 and are difficult to hunt. The red sand giant scorpion is only found in deserts. We don't have those in the Northlands. Black-robed demons do appear here sometimes, but they're highly perceptive, cautious, and avoid direct confrontation. They run at the slightest threat. Capturing one would probably require the cooperation of at least 3 second-level wizards. Second, bloodline arts reduced in rating because of low compatibility often come with side effects. Using them to fuse bloodline power can cause the body to manifest traits of the 15. The side effects for these 2 arts are listed right there. I suggest waiting. Sear Manor holds auctions every month. A better opportunity might come next month. Matthew looked at the notes. There were indeed side effects listed. He reasoned that if the bio workshop could optimize the arts, those issues would disappear. Still, third-tier 15Ns were hard to obtain. I'll buy them for now, he decided. You never know what the future holds. Erin agreed it was low risk. They shouldn't be expensive. Fusing a third-tier bloodline but only getting second-tier effects is a bad deal. few would bid against you. The carriage arrived at Sear Manor. A servant led them to the banquet hall. Sear Manor's auctions were non-anonymous. The attendees were people of standing who all knew one another. Guests along the way bowed respectfully to Princess Erin. The hall already held many people, and Erin and Alsha's arrival caused a ripple of whispers. As a second-level wizard with finely honed perception, Matthew could hear much more than ordinary people. Look, Princess Erin is here. The one beside Princess Erin is Lady Alsha, right? They seem quite close. That woman really clings to Princess Erin. What a waste. Both are rare beauties. Matthew felt his heart stir. No wonder no one had bothered Alsha since he'd arrived in the capital from Whitestone Town. Erin must have driven off troublemakers. This little princess was possessive, he thought. Attendants soon brought wine. Guests surrounded Erin to pay their respects, and she naturally became the focal point. A guest raised his glass to her with a smile. Princess Erin, you shine tonight like the brightest star in the sky, lighting this entire banquet. Erin returned an elegant smile and replied softly, Thank you, respected Mr. Vaughn. It is my honor to share this joy with everyone this evening. The guest drained his glass. Erin only sipped lightly. Those well-dressed nobles showed no arrogance in her presence. Erin's father was the most powerful man in the kingdom, while the new king was still young. After greeting Erin, the guests made a point of acknowledging Alsha as well. Once the initial greetings were done, Erin led Matthew to a box on the second floor. The boxes opened onto the hall below, giving a clear view of the first-floor auction. Though Erin had only drunk a little, her cheeks were flushed. Suddenly she turned and said, Sister Alsha drinks well. I didn't drink much either, Matthew said. He had taken a sip. Guests would naturally offer wine to Alsha. Erin leaned her head against his lap, as if it were the most natural thing. Princess Erin, this isn't appropriate. People in the other boxes can see. She gave a soft snort. Who cares? Since she wouldn't be persuaded, Matthew picked up the auction list and began to work through it. He scanned for items of interest and found a third-level 34 listed. He'd been a second-level wizard for some time, yet hadn't acquired any third-level 34. Such pieces rarely appeared outside high-end auctions. This third-level 34 looked to be an offensive lightning type. Matthew had many lightning-based means and had no need for another. He was more interested in auxiliary 34s, especially flight devices. He currently relied on the Wings of Wind 34. Its speed was decent, but it made too much noise for stealthy movement. After searching, he found a second-level flight 34 that caught his eye. It seemed to operate by manipulating 31. That meant its use might extend beyond flight. Though slower than Wings of Wind, a 34 that controlled 31 would be worth studying. He counted 3 flight 34s on the list. Each had defects. No wonder Wings of Wind is standard for court wizards, he thought. Aside from being loud, it's one of the best second-level flight forts. Most court wizards exchanged for the Wings of Wind upon promotion to formal wizard. To reach supersonic or lightspeed travel, you'd likely need a third-level flight. Movement on the first floor signaled the start of the auction. Guests returned to their seats, and an open space appeared. A woman with a waist like a water snake stood there in a high-slit formal dress that showcased her figure. The open space rose into a stage and a podium lifted in front of her. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's banquet. I will be your auctioneer, she announced, her voice smooth and enchanting. 2 maids pushed out the first item, a spice. Many of you know this, Master Baska's joyous goddess incense. With it, even a corpse could regain vigor, she declared. Master Baska's annual production is only about 1,000 grams. Tonight we offer 100 grams, 1 month's worth, auctioned in 10 lots of 10 grams each. The starting price for each lot is 1,011 is, with minimum bid increases of 100 gold coins. Her voice lit the hall. Several guests had come specifically for it and immediately called out bids. 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 20,000 once, 20,000 twice, 20,000 3 times. Congratulations to Count Brando on winning the first lot. Matthew was speechless. 10 grams probably lasted only 2 or 3 uses, yet nobles shouted wildly over such fleeting pleasures. His eyes fell on the box that had won the lot, diagonally opposite. Inside sat an elderly wizard with thinning hair and skin like crepe paper. A beautiful maid perched on his lap to pour his wine. Another stood behind, massaging his shoulders. No wonder he needs it so badly, Matthew thought. The man was a second-level wizard, yet Matthew's perception picked up an unusually abundant mana from him, mana levels that rivaled his own. Matthew wasn't native to this world. Having experienced a magical outburst in the Hogwarts world gave him a firm foundation and typically more mana than his peers. For this old man to match him suggested long cultivation at the second level. The man noticed Matthew's glance and looked toward their box with a complacent smile. His teeth were unusually numerous and pointed, like a predator's. Matthew suspected he followed the path of a bloodline wizard. He also recalled that Alsha knew the man. He used the 30 elixir to prolong his life. Matthew made a mental note. This old man could be a potential buyer for the 297, shocking change. The next 9 portions of the Goddess of Joy incense all went to the Fanged Elder. He didn't care about price. If anyone bid against him, he simply raised it. Because of that, few people bothered contesting the remaining lots, and the later auction prices fell far below those of the earlier items. The second lot was a long-handled scepter of metal with a massive gemstone set in its head. It had once belonged to a relatively famous mage in history, but age had stripped it of practical value. To collectors among the nobility, though, it was a prized piece, and many people bid on it. In the end, a noble mage bought the ancient scepter for 350,000 gold coins. These people are really rich, Matthew sighed. A scepter with no practical use fetching hundreds of thousands of gold, while the second-tier bloodline secret art he needed was only worth a few thousand to tens of thousands. That's the way collectibles work, Aaron replied. Even if they have no practical value, if someone covets them, they can go for far more than they're intrinsically worth. After a few more items changed hands, it was finally time for the bloodline secret art Matthew wanted. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item up for auction is the Red Sand Giant Scorpion Bloodline Secret Art. This is a second-tier Bloodline Secret Art, the auctioneer announced. Starting price, 5,000 gold coins, increments no less than 100 gold coins. 10 seconds passed with no bids. The air cooled. The mages at this auction aren't foolish, Matthew murmured. A second-tier Bloodline Secret Art that requires extracting bloodline power from a third-tier beast is a hard sell. Besides, Aaron added, the Red Sand Giant Scorpion doesn't even live around here. You'd have to go to the dangerous Red Land Desert to find one. If Sister Alsha wants it, she should be able to get it at the starting price. The auctioneer tried to stir interest. Bloodline secret arts are essential for mages who want to strengthen their bodies. There aren't many second-tier bloodline secret arts on the market. Wizards looking to enhance their physique, don't miss this. Matthew called out the starting bid, 5,000. He chose to bid on the Red Sand Giant Scorpion Secret Art. The price was cheap, and if the Bio-Workshop could optimize it into a third-tier secret art, he stood to make a tidy profit. 5,000 once, 5,000 twice. Any more bids? 5,000 3 times. Congratulations, Ms. Alsha, on winning the Red Sand Giant Scorpion Bloodline Secret Art, the auctioneer declared. The next item is also a second-tier Bloodline Secret Art, the Black-Robed Demon Bloodline Secret Art, he continued. The Black-Robed Demon differs from the Red Sand Giant Scorpion. It's found in these lands. Starting price, 5,000 gold coins, increments no less than 100 gold coins. 8,000, someone from the box on the right shouted. 8,100, Matthew answered. 10,000. 10,100, Matthew replied. 15,000, Aaron chuckled. Sister Alsha, you only add the minimum each time. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were a shill hired by Seer Manor. 15,100, Matthew said, smiling helplessly. Princess Aaron, I spent too many resources getting to formal wizard. I don't have much left. He wasn't trying to sound humble. If adding 100 did the job, there was no reason to throw money away. 20,000, the bidder in the box called again. 20,100, Matthew answered, frowning. If the other side bumped by another 5,000, he wouldn't follow. The Seer Manor auctions happen monthly. There was no rush to overpay for a bloodline secret art. 25,000, the other voice declared. Matthew fell silent. Aaron piped up, "Does Sister Alsha really want it? Then I'll bid for it." "No need," Matthew declined. "The price has been driven too high. For that, I could buy several copies of the Red Sand Giant Scorpion secret art." He didn't like accepting gifts that way. It felt like a trick, like using a false identity to get an innocent young woman to throw money at him. He set his jaw and let the bidding drop. A little later, another item Matthew wanted was announced. Next up is a second-tier artifact, the gravity tether. Gravity tether lets you manipulate gravity so you can fly with ease. It makes less of a scene than the court wizard's wings of wind. Its top speed isn't as fast, but it surpasses most second-tier flight spells, the auctioneer explained. Starting price, 5,000 gold coins, increments no less than 100 gold coins. Many people wanted that artifact and the price shot up quickly. Matthew kept adding just 100 each time. Gravity manipulating spells were rare and might not appear again for a while, so he was willing to pay a fair premium. Eventually, he won it for 5,100 gold coins. When the auction ended, the items were delivered and Matthew paid before leaving. "Princess Erin, it's time for us to go," he said, helpless. Erin stood, steady despite the drinks she'd had. "Then let's go back," she replied, and they left Seer Manor together. On the carriage, Matthew asked, "Princess Erin, besides the court wizard headquarters, are there other places to buy first-tier bloodline secret arts?" Erin blinked. "There are some in my family's study. Would Sister Alsha like to see?" Matthew barely heard her. His expression tightened as he sensed a powerful fluctuation of magical energy gathering outside the carriage. For a second, he feared a post-auction robbery, but the flow of power wasn't aimed at their carriage. They were on a narrow lane. After the carriage in front was intercepted, Erin's vehicle had no choice but to stop as well. "Princess Erin, something's happening outside," Matthew said, lifting the carriage curtain. The powerful surge of magic was directed at the carriage ahead. Matthew recognized it. Before he had boarded his own carriage, he'd seen the Fanged Elder, who'd won the Goddess of Joy incense, step into this very carriage. The ones who intercepted it were a man and a woman. "They look foreign. That girl's hood is styled like the Emerald Kingdom," Erin observed. "They're the folks from the box next to ours," Matthew added. "I saw them when I was going upstairs." "The box that competed with Sister Alsha for the Bloodline secret art?" "Yes, those." The leading man in white shouted arrogantly, "Old geezer, get out here now!" A cold snort answered from inside the intercepted carriage. "Who are these brats daring to harass my carriage?" "Old geezer, take a good look," the white-robed man snarled, and he ripped at the corner of his face, tearing away a disguise. Underneath the fake mask, a delicate face was revealed. The Fanged Elder in the carriage went quiet for a moment. "You're still alive," he said. "Of course I'm alive," the man ground out. "And I'll stay alive until you're dead." The young man standing outside was one of the Fanged Elder's illegitimate sons. The Elder had always liked his exercises and had fathered many children across the lands. His relationships with those children had never been honorable. He'd never taken them seriously. With no resources to grow, most of them couldn't ever reach second-level wizardry, so the Fanged Elder never considered them a threat. That this particular son had actually made second level was a surprise. The Fanged Elder rose and stepped out of his carriage, his voice cold. "You've only just broken through to second level, and you're already impatient? Even among second levels, there are ranks." He glared at the hooded woman behind the white-robed man with contempt. "Is this companion of yours your confidence? I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. She's newly entered second level, too." The white-robed man's face twisted. "I'm taking back everything that belongs to me." He reached into a spatial pouch and produced a small orb, red and black, and emanating void essence. Matthew's pupils constricted at the sight. He recognized void power. Could this man be from the Moon Candle Society? He hadn't seen this person in Alsha's memories. The white-robed man crushed the orb in his hand. A strange fluctuation vibrated through the air, and everyone felt the world lurch. A heavy feeling of weightlessness surged in their chests. Matthew knew the sensation from crossing planes. The carriage window filled with a familiar gray mist. "What was that?" It brought us into the Gap world, Matthew said, stunned. He had never seen such a device in Alsha's memories either. He peered more closely and realized their carriage was still on a narrow lane, but the gray mist of the Gap world overlaid everything. This wasn't the same as Matthew's own method of traversing. This orb created an intersection node between the Wizarding world and the Gap world, similar to the nodes in the Winter Forest. Projected images of the normal street bled through into the Gap. It was like those dream traversals he'd experienced before. Intersection nodes were relatively weak, and the Moon Candle Society had methods of entering the Gap world through rituals at such nodes. If this red and black orb could create a node and enter the Gap world without a ritual, it was even more impressive. Perhaps the Moon Candle Society had orbs like this, but Alsha had never reached second level and didn't know their secrets. I can return any time through my return sigil, but Princess Erin's been brought here too. If I leave alone, Alsha's identity will be compromised, Matthew thought. He was unwilling to abandon Erin. He'd been about to sell an artifact when this happened. Now that plan had to wait. Erin finally found her footing amid the discomfort. So unpleasant. Why is it so foggy? The coachman asked. Princess Erin, are you all right? I'm fine. What about Sister Alsha? I'm fine too. Those two groups have started fighting. Let's get off the carriage and move back a bit to avoid the crossfire. The mist is so thick I can't see anything, Erin said. She could only make out vague street shapes and didn't realize they were already in the Gap world. Matthew heard the sounds ahead. The Fanged Elder and the white-robed man were battling. Perhaps the white-robed man's orb had some method of returning from the Gap world. Matthew decided to wait and see how it played out. Then his expression changed. He grabbed Erin and, with wings of wind already coalesced on his back, burst through the carriage roof. Dense masses of small creatures surged in from ahead. The passengers left on the carriage were instantly swarmed by a sea of centipedes. So many bugs. Erin went pale. Matthew's face darkened. The Gap world was full of hidden dangers, and the gray mist had dulled his perception. By the time he'd realized the threat, the carriage was surrounded by centipedes. 2 carriages behind them had also been dragged into the Gap world. Matthew glanced back to see they too were being overwhelmed. 1 or 2 screams echoed before cutting off abruptly. When the white-robed man's group arrived in the Gap world, the hooded woman said coolly, "You hold him off for a bit. I'll let my little darlings fill their bellies first." Beneath her black robe, her skin writhed. Small bumps bulged under the fabric as if countless things crawled just beneath. A moment later, swarms of centipedes poured out from under her skirt. She didn't bother to control them deliberately. She let them hunt for fresh blood and flesh on their own. Tasting fresh flesh made them more active. The sea of centipedes surged toward the 2 carriages behind Matthew's, devouring them quickly. After feeding, the swarm emitted a blood-colored halo. This was the hooded woman's home ground. She often came here to foster her little brood. When these centipedes fed on the Gap world's monsters, they grew stronger and better adapted to the environment and hungrier for blood and flesh. That was how she had advanced to second level, by feeding them and absorbing the feedback they gave to her own bloodline power. The white-robed man tried to hold the Fanged Elder, but he couldn't stand for long. He was being overpowered. The hooded woman wasted no time and sent her little darlings surging toward him. Young people always like to cheat and ambush the elderly. The hooded woman was 1 step too late. The Fanged Elder's strength far exceeded what she and the white-robed man had estimated. By the time she reached the fight, the white-robed man had already been subdued. The Fanged Elder had traveled far along the path of a bloodline wizard. A second-level wizard could fuse and absorb at most 3 types of third-tier bloodline power. Once 3 were fused, one could attempt the breakthrough to 3rd level. Something had gone wrong while this elder fused his third-tier bloodline, and further progress had been blocked, but he was still stronger than most 31 who had only fused 2 third-tier bloodlines, and far beyond someone like the white-robed man who had just reached 2nd level. The Fanged Elder's body bulged, his eyes gorged, and his mouth grew enormous. Thick scales sprouted across him. From under his 31 robes, a massive tail unfurled, turning him into a gigantic humanoid crocodile. After Matthew lifted Aaron into the air, he used the invisible hand to support them both and floated to watch the battle below. The gray fog obscured vision, but this was a newly formed intersection node, so the fog wasn't too thick. If they stayed low, they could still see the fight. Matthew's gaze sharpened when he saw the Fanged Elder's transformation. That kind of morphing appeared only after fusing at least one third-tier bloodline. The Elder's body was extremely formidable. The Fanged Elder gaped and lunged at the white-robed man. The man hurriedly erected a 33 shield, but the Elder's maw crushed it like paper. The white-robed man's right hand and the 34 in it were bitten to pieces. The Fanged Elder then raised a hand and cast a spell to knock him unconscious. He spared the man's life. None of his direct descendants had yet reached second level. This son showed talent, and he intended to take him back for discipline. Most importantly, he didn't know where this place was. Even through the gray fog, he could tell this was not the royal capital. "Deal with that woman first," the Fanged Elder said, glancing at the hooded woman as her pets began to swarm. "Kill him for me." The hooded woman unleashed the centipede swarm against the Fanged Elder, but it was no longer invincible. The Elder's scales curled and a thick green mist gushed from the gaps, an extremely potent neurotoxin. Where the mist touched, the 1,000-foot centipedes curled into tight balls, leaving a trail of clustered inactive centipedes in their wake. The hooded woman's face drained of color. She hadn't expected him to be so formidable. Ignoring her prizes on the ground and the fallen white-robed man, she fled. She knew this intersection node and could find another back to the real world if she moved carefully. If she didn't run now, she'd be trapped. The Fanged Elder had anticipated her escape. While releasing the mist, he had already condensed wings of wind on his back and struck out. The hooded woman had barely begun a flight spell when she felt huge pincers clamp her throat. The Fanged Elder lifted her up. Seeing the astonishment on her face, he grinned savagely. "You should be grateful I don't like bugs," he snarled, tightening his grip to snap her neck. The hooded woman's expression went merciless, then her face suddenly shriveled like a deflating balloon. Countless centipedes poured from the hollowed orifices of that shriveled skin. The Fanged Elder flared his scales and unleashed the green mist again, but these blood-colored centipedes, nurtured on her flesh, were far stronger than the earlier 1,000-foot centipedes. They swarmed over the slightly opened scales, braved the green mist, and bit into the flesh between the gaps. Only after injecting their toxin did they curl and drop. "Damn it!" The toxin felled the Fanged Elder's right arm. It hung limp, and his hand quickly blackened like charcoal. The hooded woman was reduced to nothing but empty skin. The flesh and bones gone, the skin in her dress fell to the ground. From beneath them, a golden centipede, carrying a 7 in its mouth, burrowed into the earth and escaped. The Fanged Elder, humiliated, snatched potions from his fore and drank. The potions halted the poison's spread, but the charred hand would not heal quickly. He was furious. He incinerated the hooded woman's skin and dress with a spell. "She actually escaped," he snarled. He hadn't found the 7. He hadn't expected to be set back while dealing with 2 juniors. With his fused third-tier power, he should have handled them easily. He had lived in luxury in the royal capital too long. His combat instincts hadn't kept pace with his strength. The Fanged Elder unfurled his wings of wind and flew toward Matthew and Aaron. His crocodile mouth split into a grotesque smile. "Princess Aaron, how fortunate you are to be unharmed." Matthew tightened his vigilance. This was no longer the royal capital, perhaps not even the wizarding world. Aaron's title might count for nothing here. Aaron was not foolish. She'd realized they were outside the capital too, and her fingers tightened on Matthew's arm. She gave a composed smile. "Count Brando is indeed a second-level wizard, subduing the attackers so efficiently. That attacker should have a way back." The Fanged Elder didn't answer her directly. He looked at Matthew. "Alsha, this is the kingdom of God your society speaks of, right? You should know the way back?" Matthew's eyes narrowed. The Elder had openly outed Alsha's identity before Aaron. He didn't intend to let them go easily. Matthew's guess was right. The Fanged Elder wanted Alsha and Aaron. He was a man who delighted in exercise and had long coveted the 2 beauties famous across the kingdom. In this other world, with his strength, he could do as he pleased. I don't know the way back. I am not one of the people responsible for exploring the kingdom of God, Lord Brando, Matthew said with a calm smile. He left Aaron on the invisible hand and floated forward toward the elder. The fanged elder's eyes gleamed. He believed Alsha would throw herself at him. He was already thinking how he might spare her, then return with her as proof to pin Princess Erin's death on the hooded woman. Alsha, if you are willing to sign a 12, I can spare your life. Suddenly, the elder's perception of time warped. Everything slowed to a crawl. Alsha's smile seemed to distort. From Erin's point of view, she saw Alsha place a hand on the fanged elder's shoulder and feared she'd been abandoned. Before she could be sad, Alsha's other hand erupted in thunder. A spear of compressed lightning condenses from empty air. In that instant, Alsha resembled a goddess of thunder, her skirt like a night sky in a river of stars, and the thunder spear seemed to call down countless bolts. The spear sank into the fanged elder's chest. White light swallowed the three of them in an instant. Boom! A deafening thunderclap shattered the air. Erin's ears rang. She could not hear anything. The sound had exceeded what her ears could bear. She groaned, clutched her head, and slumped on the invisible hand. Her head buzzed, and for a while she was cut off from the outside world. When the dizziness and ringing eased a little, she noticed her cheek was warm, her white gloves smeared with bright blood. The thunder had made her ears bleed. She looked at the figure who had just struck the elder with conflicted feelings. She had known Alsha for a long time and had noticed differences. The Alsha who had gone to Whitestone Town had been much more affectionate toward her than this one. At first, Erin thought it was distance and time, but Alsha no longer asked her for things. The 33 and Bloodline's secret arts Alsha had purchased at headquarters were in her study, something the old Alsha would never have done. She really isn't Sister Alsha, Erin thought. Still, this Sister Alsha seemed more reliable and gave her a stronger sense of security. Below the fanged elder's neck, everything had been obliterated. Matthew held the head with the invisible hand. That thunderous strike had been condensed by Matthew using almost all of his 33 power. The 33 from ancient Egypt had a very high upper limit. The power of thunderous strikes scaled with the amount of 33 put into it. Matthew hadn't discovered its cap yet. Had the strike failed, he would have immediately fled by the 21 and abandoned the Alsha persona. Fortunately, thunderous strike had worked. Matthew had recently found a new use for the barrier of time. It was originally a defensive 33 that consumed time power. It slowed an enemy's attack to give the caster time to dodge. In practice, he'd noticed the barrier formed an invisible temporal field around him, and anything that touched it could be affected by time power. If he could get close enough to make an enemy touch the field, he might affect them directly. It took far more time power to influence living beings, and this brief use had consumed a large portion of the time power accumulated by Qtain on the 21. It's a trump card, not a routine tactic, Matthew thought. But against a foe with such a durable body, using it this once had been worth the cost. You are not Alsha, the fanged elder, now only a crocodile head, roared. Alsha could not be a second-level wizard. Who are you? Go think about it in hell. Matthew saw the wounds along his neck regenerating fast and knew he had no time to stall. His figure blurred into overlapping, shifting layers. Then, 6 killing curses, Avada Kedavra, fired at once, converging into one devastating killing curse. Matthew's time instant kill formation brought the spells he released at different moments to the same point in time. A surge of green light engulfed the fanged elder's head. The deathly green pierced through his brow into the 7 could not withstand it and shattered under the killing curse. The green light poured through the broken crystal core into the fanged elder's 24. A riddled, decaying soul dwelt at the center of that 24, and he desperately rallied it to resist. But spiritual power could not hold against a 30 attack of that level. The fanged elder's 24 collapsed. A tearing agony cut into the depths of his soul, and he screamed. His soul exploded into fragments. Matthew exhaled in relief as the long gnawing weakness left his body. He hadn't burned so much in a single effort for a long time. The killing curse was no longer a heavy drain for him, but the previous thunderous strike had been costly. He drew a bottle of through-restoring potion from his pocket and drank. This was a dangerous gap world. He couldn't be careless. He had not held back against the Fanged Elder, and the enemy had left nothing behind, but the unconscious white-robed man was a trophy. Matthew searched him and found a 299. Harvest. This scroll of the black-robed demon bloodline's secret art has finally fallen into my hands. Matthew pulled the scroll from the white-robed man's 10. The man who had bid for and won the black-robed demon bloodline's secret art at the auction was indeed the white-robed man. Matthew took several out of his pocket and poured them down the white-robed man's throat. In Matthew's magical perception, the Funine power within the white-robed man's body had been blocked and nearly stopped flowing. Even if the man woke, he would be unable to cast spells. Using his spiritual power to probe the state of the white-robed man's, Matthew found the spiritual barrier breached and the soul bound, the same cast by the Fanged Elder. Once a second-level wizard's spiritual barrier is broken and the link between soul and body is severed, they appear to be in a coma from the outside. That saves me some trouble. Matthew attempted legilimency on the white-robed man's soul. It was his first time using legilimency on a second-level wizard. A second-level wizard's brain is little more than the connection point between soul and body. Consciousness and memory actually dwell in the soul within the. Without the natural barrier of the crystal core and these protection, the white-robed man's soul was defenseless. Matthew's legilimency pulled many memory fragments straight from his mind. Through those memories, Matthew pieced together the truth. The white-robed man was the Fanged Elder's illegitimate son. The father and son had a deep grudge. He had come to the Blizzard Kingdom specifically to take revenge on his biological father. Until now, he had lived in the Emerald Kingdom. Matthew found evidence that the Emerald Kingdom also had an organization researching the Gap World. The white-robed man and the hooded woman were not members of the Moon Candle Society. They belonged to a secret organization called the Land of Mist, another name they used for the Gap World. The black and red orb that had created the intersection node and sent them into the Gap World was a product of the Land of Mist's research into that realm. The Land of Mist was actually founded by core members of the Alchemists Association. Their methods of reaching the Gap World are more sophisticated than the Moon Candle Society's. The Moon Candle Society lacked the means to directly create intersection nodes and could only search for naturally occurring ones. The Land of Mist and the Moon Candle Society had different approaches to exploring the Gap World. The Moon Candle Society relied more on that intermittently relying 9, while the Land of Mist explored independently and had no contact with the 9. Matthew searched the white-robed man's and found 4 black and red orbs and 5. The black and red orbs were the same type the white-robed man had used. The 32 were alchemical devices that allowed one to return from an intersection node to the wizarding world. With a way back secured, Matthew felt relieved and continued to sift through the white-robed man's memories. The man's willingness to spend so much on the black-robed demon bloodline's secret art suggested he must have information or a trail on a black-robed demon. As Matthew expected, he soon found details. When the 2 visitors from the Emerald Kingdom were traveling to the 6th Ring Wizard City, they had encountered black-robed demons, 4 adult black-robed demons gathered together. An adult black-robed demon is a 3rd-tier magical creature with sharp senses and strength comparable to an ordinary second-level wizard. Capturing one is very difficult. 4 together would be worse, so the 2 had not engaged. Seeing the black-robed demon bloodline's secret art at auction, the white-robed man paid a high price to buy it, planning to recruit second-level wizard helpers to capture the demons after dealing with the Fanged Elder. They're in an abandoned mine southeast of the capital, Matthew noted. He also found a map of the Gap World in the 10. The Land of Mist had actually mapped part of the Gap World. The map bore no markings for any wizard tower, so the Land of Mist apparently hadn't encountered one. It marked several dangerous areas, all places Matthew had not yet visited. In addition, the 10 contained several meditation methods, spells, and hundreds of stones. To Matthew's slight regret, like him, the white-robed man still lacked any third-tier spells. Nevertheless, selling the meditation methods and spells would yield a good number of foreign stones. A man doesn't get rich without a windfall, just as a horse doesn't get fat without nightgrass. This haul will cover at least a year's worth of my expenses. At that moment, Erin flew down from the sky. Matthew noticed blood on her gloves. "Your Highness, Erin, how did you get injured?" Erin had already used a healing on her ears and could hear again. "I was hurt by the shock from that thunder just now," she said. Matthew paused. He hadn't considered that. A second-level wizard's constitution is naturally stronger, and after these past 2 days of strengthening from the bloodline secret art, his own constitution had become much tougher, so the thunder hadn't affected him. "My apologies, I cannot control the sound of the thunder," he said. "You must have many questions right now, Your Highness." Erin nodded gently and asked calmly, "You aren't Sister Alsha, are you?" Matthew was a little surprised by her directness. "No," he said quietly, "I am not Alsha." Erin continued, "Sister Alsha is at most the strength of a formal wizard. She could never possess such terrifying methods. I didn't expect you to be so powerful that even a second-level wizard like Count Brando couldn't match you. Thinking back, you seemed to avoid meeting me because you were afraid I'd discover your disguise, right? That's why you took the mission to guard the mine and hid outside the capital. So your purpose in disguising yourself as Sister Alsha wasn't to get close to me or the Sill family. Is it related to that society Count Brando mentioned?" Matthew smiled. "Your Highness, Erin is clever. Yes, it is somewhat related to that society. Those who took the secret medicine to extend their lives were Matthew's target customers for this store, so saying it was related to the society was not wrong." Erin looked into his eyes and asked quietly, "Will I die here?" Matthew shook his head. "I will send you back, but you won't remember what just happened. Everything will remain as it was." Erin's cheeks flushed faintly. She hesitated, then said, "The way you treat me feels better than Sister Alsha's. Can I see what you really look like?" She knew Alsha's care came with material obligations. Matthew treated her as an equal, no flattery for rank, no expectations. He had saved her twice now, and that made her feel safer than Alsha's protection. "Of course," Matthew smiled. "Not. Obliviate." Erin's eyes dulled as her memories after the auction were erased. Matthew caught the collapsing Erin with one hand, and with the other waved his tap, instantly killing the white-robed man on the ground. Fiend fire burst over the man's body, burning him to ash. After dispelling the fiend fire, Matthew used a thirst to clear the blood from Erin's gloves. He carried her to the wrecked carriage. When the 1,000-foot centipedes had packed into the carriage earlier, they had bent and broken parts of it. Matthew waved his spec and restored the carriage to its original state, then used transfiguration to create a coachman and a horse. He intended to maintain the charade a while. Once the news died down, no one would pry into a missing coachman. If anyone questioned tonight's events, he would insist they had never encountered the Fanged Elder and his group. With Erin to corroborate the lie, others would have to accept it. Matthew crushed up. A strange energy fluctuation vibrated through him, and a strong sense of weightlessness filled his chest. A moment later, the carriage returned to the capital's streets. Seeing no one about, he commanded the transfigured coachman toward Erin's mansion. When they arrived, Matthew called softly, "Your Highness Erin, we've arrived." Erin's eyelids fluttered. She slowly opened her eyes and frowned. "Where are we? What happened? My head feels so dizzy." "We're home. You said you were a bit sleepy and took a short rest," Matthew told the servants who came out. "Your Highness Erin is tired. Please take her inside and help her rest." "My head is so dizzy. Did I drink a lot?" Erin asked, clutching her head. "Then Sister Alsha should also rest early." After the servants helped Erin inside, Matthew took the carriage back to his residence. Once there, he thought and returned to the wizard tower. He impatiently took out the black-robed demon bloodline secret art and the red sand giant scorpion bloodline secret art. 0. Attempt to optimize these two bloodline secret arts based on my constitution. A moment later, the tower spirit answered, Black-robed demon bloodline secret art compatibility, 12.1%. Optimization is estimated to raise compatibility to 42.1 to 51.3%. Red Sand Giant Scorpion Bloodline Secret Art compatibility, 13.4%. Optimization is estimated to raise compatibility to 43.9 to 53.6%. Proceed with optimization? Matthew's heart leapt. Both had the potential to be optimized above 60% compatibility. He then took out two first-tier Bloodline Secret Arts he had bought from the Court Wizard headquarters. 0. Attempt to optimize these two Bloodline Secret Arts based on my constitution. The Tower Spirit replied, Faceless Ape Bloodline Secret Art compatibility, 16.6%. Optimization estimated to increase compatibility to 31.1 to 43.9%. Giant Clawed Cat Bloodline Secret Art compatibility, 17.4%. Optimization estimated to increase compatibility to 35.9 to 48.6%. Proceed with optimization? The Giant Clawed Cat and Faceless Ape Bloodline Secret Arts, like the two second-tier ones, also had a chance to be optimized to over 60% compatibility. Optimize these secret arts immediately, Matthew ordered. Estimated time required, 5 hours. The Tower Spirit replied. Confirm optimization. After speaking, Matthew went to the quiet room and began practicing his meditation method. Before the auction, he had drunk another silver-winged snake that had not yet fully digested. He needed to practice to accelerate digestion of the bloodline power. One day later, Matthew felt the bloodline energy fully assimilated. 0. Check my physical changes. A translucent light panel appeared before him. Strength 2.6, Constitution 3.2, Agility 8.5, Perception 19.2. After digestion, his strength and constitution had each risen by 0.1. Including the 0.2 strength and 0.1 constitution gained when he first drank this second silver-winged snake had increased his strength by 0.3 and constitution by 0.2 in total. Matthew immediately drank the final silver-winged snake. Once it was digested, he would be able to condense the silver-winged snake. After drinking the third Dean, his attributes read, Strength 2.8, Constitution 3.3, Agility 8.5, Perception 19.2. Strength rose by 0.2 and Constitution by 0.1. The change in agility was still too small to show on the panel. Matthew felt confident he could now perform a feat like Matthew beating the tiger. A single punch might be enough to paralyze a tiger. Wizards who follow the bloodline path really develop terrifying bodies. I just don't know how many times I need to strengthen mine to reach a physical intensity like Count Brando's. He had seen Count Brando bite through a protection spell with his teeth and recover from wounds at a speed visible to the eye. The man's vitality was frightening. 0. Is the Bloodline Secret Art optimization finished? Optimization complete. The compatibility of the black-robed demon Bloodline Secret Art with the Master has increased to 62.1%. The compatibility of the Red Sand Giant Scorpion Bloodline Secret Art with the Master has increased to 61.3%. The compatibility of the Faceless Ape Bloodline Secret Art with the Master has increased to 55.6%. The compatibility of the Giant Clawed Cat Bloodline Secret Art with the Master has increased to 53.3%. To Matthew's surprise, both second-tier Bloodline Secret Arts exceeded 60% after optimization and successfully became third-tier Bloodline Secret Arts. Conversely, the two first-tier Bloodline Secret Arts failed to reach 60% and did not become second-tier. Matthew was already very satisfied. He had no other way to obtain and could only get them by optimizing second-tier arts. He now had channels to buy both first and four arts, so the failure didn't matter much. He did give a thought to the Red Sand Giant Scorpion. It lived only in the desert regions to the southwest, an area so dangerous that even second-level wizards feared the frequent magical storms. The creature hid underground and was unaffected by those storms, making the sand layers its habitat. Required someone to have condensed a second tier 3 times, so Matthew didn't need to worry about that immediately. Besides, he now had information on the black-robed demon. Matthew continued practicing his meditation method, preparing to condense the silver-winged snake. One day later, he checked his attributes again. A moment later, the translucent panel appeared. Strength 2.9, Constitution 3.4, Agility 8.5, Perception 19.2. Constitution had risen by zero point 0.1 and strength by another 0.1, including the 0.2 strength and 0.1 constitution gained from the first. This second silver-winged snake had increased his strength by 0.3 and constitution by 0.2 in total. Matthew noticed a pattern. Except for the first the changes from the subsequent two were identical. Each gave 0.2 strength and 0.1 constitution upon drinking, followed by another 0.1 to both after digestion. Next, he planned to condense the silver-winged snake. 300. Chance encounter. Matthew had already taken the silver-winged snake's bloodline 3 times and was now able to condense its essence. Following the method on the secret art scroll, he reached into the bloodline power hidden inside him. The scroll had warned this step would take a long time, but Matthew's keen perception made the process faster than usual. He found and manipulated the hidden power without much delay. Condensing a bloodline orb required work at the heart, literally, so few wizards below second level tried bloodline secret arts. One slip could damage the heart and be fatal. By contrast, as long as a second-level wizard's life core remained intact, they would not truly die. Fatal wounds could be healed with potions, so practicing such arts was far less perilous. Under Matthew's control, the bloodline power gathered into a single mass in his chest. At the same time, the magical energy in his body grew restless and surged toward it. A dull, rhythmic pounding filled the room. It was the sound of a heartbeat. His heart thudded like a drum, as if it might burst. After a tense while, the small silver sphere finished forming and the surging energy calmed. The roaring heartbeat faded. Done. Matthew felt his body strengthened. 0. Check my physical changes. A translucent screen floated into being. Strength 3.3, Constitution 3.9, Agility 8.7, Perception. Strength had risen by 0.4, Constitution by 0.5, Agility by 0.2. Overall, since beginning the silver-winged snake's bloodline secret art, his strength had increased 1.5, constitution 1.2, and agility 0.3. The improvement was substantial. His outward appearance hadn't changed, but his skin and muscles were tougher, an ability of the silver-winged snake bloodline. Matthew produced a solid iron rod the thickness of his arm. With little force, the rod snapped like a twig. A second-tier bloodline art already gives such power. No wonder Count Brando could punch through the white-robed man's energy shield with sheer strength. He didn't know how many bloodline reinforcements Count Brando had undergone, but anyone who could shift their form like that had at least a third-tier bloodline reinforcement. Once Matthew completed 2 more second-tier bloodline arts, he could reinforce the black-robed demon bloodline secret art. The storms of magical energy in the desert made that region too dangerous, so he decided to prioritize the black-robed demon art. Now he had to figure out how to capture a black-robed demon. Hiring a second-level wizard was expensive, and if too few went, they might fail. The black-robed demons were very cautious and adept at escaping. If too many went, the spoils would be thinly divided. Making a bloodline totem required a lot of bloodline power. To condense another orb, he would need at least 1 intact black-robed demon. The abandoned mine was close to the mine where he was stationed under the identity of Alsha. The cluster of mines outside the royal capital contained both the mine he supervised and the abandoned one with traces of black-robed demons. He returned to his residence and flew toward the location he'd seen in the white-robed man's memory. As he neared, Matthew deactivated his wind wings and switched to gravity tether to glide silently. Black-robed demons had excellent perception, and he didn't want to alert them prematurely. Gravity tether let him float soundlessly. This would be effective in combat against an enemy, he thought. As a flight technique, it was only average, but matched his needs. Matthew cast a disillusionment charm, suppressing his magical energy signature as he inched closer. He sensed the black-robed demons ahead. His perception outmatched theirs. He had detected their energy before entering their sensory zone. 5 black-robed demons, 2 with weak signatures. Juveniles? He muttered, pleased. If some were juvenile, he might be able to take this group alone. Black-robed demons reproduced unusually. They split off part of themselves, and the split fragment would grow into a new individual. After splitting, the original body stayed weakened for a time. As Matthew approached, he saw 4 adult-sized black-robed demons and 2 small ones. A black-robed demon looked like a humanoid cloaked in a black hooded robe, but under the hood was empty. The robe itself was its flesh. They were not naturally born magical creatures, but experiments of ancient wizards. That weakened adult, having recently split off a juvenile, was the ideal capture target. A mature individual, even weakened, was enough to craft a bloodline totem. Matthew suddenly froze. Ahead, wizards lay in ambush. They shouldn't be here for me. Has someone else found this group? He thought. The abandoned mine wasn't so remote. It made sense others had discovered it. He sensed the energy signatures of 1 second-level wizard and 8 first-level wizards, a well-prepared party. Their target was likely the same weakened black-robed demon. With only 1 second-level wizard leading them, they couldn't take down all the demons, but Matthew would wait. Acting rashly could lead to a pincer attack from both the black-robed demons and the ambushers. He changed his disguise. Since he'd come from the mine, he was still in Alsha's guise, but if he needed to reveal the strength of a second-level wizard, he had to swap personas. His figure shifted into that of an unremarkable man. The group made their move. They launched several spells at the weakened black-robed demon. Explosions shredded the creature into strips of black fabric. An invisible hand gathered the fragments and floated them toward the second-level wizard. "Miss Philly?" Matthew was startled. Among the first-level wizards was someone he knew, Philly, the shopkeeper of Changson Potions. The formation seemed to center around her. Then the other black-robed demons screamed. Sensing only 1 second-level wizard, they didn't flee but swarmed. 3 adult black-robed demons darted in front of the invisible hand and used their energy to smash it. The tattered strips were absorbed by the 3, which immediately grew larger as they fed, each swelling by a whole size category, now towering figures in black robes. The second-level wizard ambushing them was a purple-haired woman with a long, snake-like face. She didn't expect social black-robed demons, those that could also merge with one another, to be so hard to handle. "Continue the attack," she shouted. The first-level wizards coordinated more spells. Fierce winds carrying ice blades swept at the 3 demons, but they dodged with terrifying speed and merged together. "They're too fast. Most of my spells wouldn't hit," Matthew judged internally. Moments later, the 3 had fused into a single giant black robe demon. The vast hooded robe floated like an omen of death, a black wave sweeping toward the party. The long-faced woman, Feely called her Senior Mia, tugged Feely and began to retreat, but the others were less fortunate. The black robe engulfed 7 first-level wizards before they could react. Screams echoed within the robe. Moments later, 7 skeletons were shaken out. The demon had drained their flesh and blood, leaving only bones. The long-faced woman fled with Philly, but the black-robed demon pursued with frightening speed, the black robe surging like a dark tide toward them. They couldn't dodge in time. The woman raised an energy shield to block the robe, but the demon's magic made its surface corrosive, quickly eroding the shield. Feely didn't sit idle. She burned part of the robe with a single-use alchemical item, but it barely dented the massive garment as more black folds wound around them. They were close to Matthew. He decided to intervene. Feely was useful to him. She sold his potions and provided information and resources. He couldn't let her die. He shifted appearance again to Gelman, the identity Feely knew. Raising his spell focus, he unleashed several flying blades. He applied air transmutation, and the blades suddenly filled the space around the demon, leaving no room to evade. When a black-robed demon loses its speed advantage, it becomes far less terrifying. The robe was sliced to tatters. Matthew sent an invisible hand and pulled the 2 women free. "Mr. Gelman?" Feely exclaimed, surprised. She knew Gelman was a second-level wizard. Now that 2 second-level wizards stood against the demon, they had a fighting chance. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Gelman," Feely said. She introduced the long-faced woman. "Senior Mia, this is Mr. Gelman, who's also a second-level wizard." "Thank you for your help," Mia echoed. "Let's finish off the black-robed demon," Matthew said. Although shredded, the robe had powerful self-repair. The torn strips stitched themselves back together on contact. Feely said, "You have to shatter its vessels. Usually their life cores are located in the chest of the humanoid form, but I don't know where they are after merging." Third-tier magical creatures also had life cores, but black-robed demons were special. After merging, they carried several life cores, and all had to be destroyed to kill one. Matthew nodded and shaped the air into a blade vortex. The demon at the center was cut into countless pieces as if by 1,000 knives. Its repair couldn't keep pace. 3 life cores were exposed. Almost instantly, Matthew fired several death curses in succession, shattering all 3 cores at once. The tattered strips lost their cohesion and drifted to the ground. A breeze gathered them into a heap. They looked like rags, but they still bled faintly. A remarkable structure, Matthew breathed. He looked at the stunned pair. "Are you two all right?" Feely recovered first, eyes wide. "Mr. Gelman, you're not just amazing at making potions. Your combat ability is incredible." Her impression of him had been overturned. She had thought Gelman a research-minded wizard. He had the talent to be a third-tier pharmacist and the resources that implied, but research wizards usually weren't so strong in combat. The power he'd shown was higher than many veteran second-level wizards. Mia was equally shocked. She too was research-oriented and felt the gulf between second-level wizards keenly. "Is Mr. Gelman also a master pharmacist?" she asked. "I'm a third-tier pharmacist," Matthew nodded, his gaze lingering on Mia. Her features marked her as a hybrid, part of a humanoid magical race with long faces, similar to the long-eared clan. Purebloods of that race were rare, mostly assimilated into human society. "Thank you again for saving us, Mr. Gelman," Feely said gratefully.